At a family barbecue, my sister-in-law bragged, saying, "I am selling the family mountain resort for profit." I just smiled. She did not know I had quietly bought it years earlier, and she had no idea what was about to happen. My name is Kendra. I am 35 years old, and my family has always treated me like the invisible backup plan. Before I share how I brought their entire house of cards crashing down, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you know exactly how it feels to be the scapegoat in your own family. The thick, sweet smoke of barbecue brisket and the heavy bass of 90s rhythm and blues drifting from the outdoor speakers should have made my parents' sprawling Atlanta backyard feel like home. The July heat was oppressive, but Andre and Vivian Washington never let a little humidity ruin their annual summer showcase. Their perfectly manicured lawn was crowded with extended family, old college friends, and wealthy neighbors who all bought into the polished facade my parents worked so hard to maintain. I stood near the edge of the stone patio, a cold glass sweating in my hand, observing the familiar performance with a familiar ache in my chest. Growing up in this massive brick house meant understanding that love was conditional and attention was strictly finite. This home was essentially a shrine to my older brother Trey. Every high school sports trophy, every mediocre college achievement, every minor career step he took was celebrated with grand dinners and lavish gifts. Meanwhile, my quiet milestones, earning a full academic scholarship, building a career from the ground up, and ultimately becoming a senior wealth management advisor at a top firm, were met with polite nods before the conversation inevitably shifted back to whatever Trey was attempting to do next. Today was absolutely no different. Trey stood by the edge of the infinity pool, a crisp linen shirt clinging to his broad shoulders, laughing loudly at a joke one of my uncles had made. Beside him stood his wife Chloe. She was a petite white woman who had married into our family 3 years ago and immediately adopted my parents' habit of treating me like an inconvenient employee. Chloe thrived on the social hierarchy my mother had established, happily taking her place as the wife of the golden child, while viewing me as the bitter sister who simply did not understand how to succeed in life. I watched as Chloe stepped up to the edge of the stone fire pit, her eyes scanning the yard. She raised a heavy crystal pitcher of margaritas and tapped a manicured fingernail against the glass. The sharp clinking sound cut through the music and the laughter, demanding the entire yard stop and pay attention. People turned toward her, their plates of ribs and potato salad temporarily forgotten. Trey quickly wrapped his arm around Chloe's waist, wearing a grin so wide and self-satisfied it looked almost painful. He puffed out his chest, soaking in the anticipation of the crowd like a plant soaking up sunlight. Chloe cleared her throat, ensuring all eyes were glued to her before she spoke. "We have some incredible news to share with everyone today," Chloe announced, her voice carrying that high-pitched entitlement she had perfected since joining the family. "As many of you know, Trey and I have been pouring our hearts and souls into managing the Blue Ridge property. It has been a massive labor of love preserving the Washington family legacy up in the mountains." She paused, letting the suspense build, as my parents moved to the front of the crowd, their faces shining with anticipation. But today, Chloe continued, her voice rising in triumph. "We are thrilled to announce that we have officially finalized a deal to sell the resort to a corporate developer. The sale price is $4.5 million. The yard erupted. Aunts and uncles gasped in shock before breaking into loud applause and excited cheers. Plastic cups were raised in the air as family members crowded around to offer their congratulations. My parents pushed their way through the throng, their faces glowing with a fierce, blinding pride they had never once directed at me. My father, Andre, a man who rarely showed physical affection, slapped Trey on the back and pulled him into a tight, emotional embrace. My mother, Vivian, wiped a dramatic tear from her cheek and turned to face the cheering crowd. "Trey always had the real business mind in this family," she declared loudly, making absolutely sure her voice carried over the noise of the celebration. "We knew passing the deed to him was the right choice. He has secured our generational wealth and made us all so proud." I watched this staggering display of delusion from the shade of the patio awning my face an unreadable mask. Generational wealth. The phrase tasted like ash in my mouth. If only the cheering relatives knew the truth about Trey's brilliant business mind. If only they knew what had actually transpired 5 years ago when Trey ran that very same beloved resort straight into the ground. But before I could process the sheer audacity of my mother's revisionist history, the crowd parted slightly. Chloe was walking straight toward me. The triumphant smile on her face was sharp, calculated, and entirely predatory. She bypassed my aunts, ignored my cousins, and stopped right in front of the patio chair where I had just sat down. In her hand, she held a crisp white piece of paper. She did not hand it to me like a normal person. She looked down her nose at me and dropped the paper directly onto my lap. I looked down at the document. It was the catering invoice for the barbecue. The total balance due was $500. I looked back up at her, keeping my posture relaxed and my expression entirely neutral, refusing to give her the reaction she so desperately craved. Chloe tilted her head, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that was intentionally loud enough for the nearby tables to hear clearly. "Since you are just a single woman pushing papers at some boutique firm down in the city, Kendra," she said, making sure to emphasize the word single with a sharp little sigh of pity, "maybe you can at least cover the ribs today." I felt a few of my relatives turn to look at us, the joy of the announcement suddenly tainted by the awkwardness of her public insult. Chloe did not care. She was reveling in her perceived superiority. "Trey and I are moving into a completely different tax bracket now." She continued, resting her hand on her hip. "We are carrying the weight of the family legacy and building a real empire. You are just existing. So it is only fair you pitch in for the potato salad while we handle the millions." The sheer disrespect was a physical weight in the humid air. She was calling me a failure in front of my own blood relatives, reducing my decade of grueling work in wealth management to pushing papers and treating me like a charity case who needed to buy her seat at the family table. I saw my mother glance over from across the yard. Vivian saw exactly what Chloe was doing. She saw the invoice on my lap. She saw the condescension in Chloe's posture. And my mother did absolutely nothing. She simply turned back to Trey and continued laughing, as if my humiliation was a perfectly acceptable part of the celebration. I did not cry. I did not yell. I did not throw my drink in Chloe's face, no matter how much the impulse burned in my veins. A lifetime of being the family scapegoat had taught me that reacting emotionally only gave them ammunition to call me unstable and jealous. Instead, I calmly reached into my designer handbag. I bypassed the cash and pulled out my heavy black American Express card. Without breaking eye contact, I slid the metal card across the smooth surface of the patio table and tapped it once with my index finger. "I will handle the caterer, Chloe." I said, my voice smooth and dangerously calm. "Congratulations on your big sale." Chloe scoffed, snatching the card off the table. She gave me a look of pure pity, clearly assuming I was putting myself into crippling credit card debt just to save face in front of the family. She spun on her heel and strutted back toward her husband, waving the black card in the air like a hunting trophy. As soon as her back was turned, I let out a slow, measured breath. I watched her hand the glossy corporate prospectus to my father, who studied it like a sacred text. They were so busy celebrating their phantom millions that they had no idea they were dancing on the edge of a cliff. I excused myself from the crowded patio, slipping through the sliding glass doors into the cool, quiet sanctuary of the kitchen. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened a text thread with Elias, my lead corporate attorney, and one of the most ruthless legal minds in Atlanta. My fingers flew across the screen as I typed out the message. "They just publicly announced the sale of the Blue Ridge property. They think they are cashing out for $4.5 million. I hit send and watched the little typing bubble appear almost instantly on Elias's end. I typed a second message before he could reply. "Let them set the trap. Let them pop the champagne and make all their grand plans. We snap it shut at the closing table." I locked my phone and slid it back into my pocket, a cold, patient smile spreading across my face. They wanted to humiliate me over a barbecue bill. They had absolutely no idea that I was the one who owned the very ground they were standing on. My sister-in-law laughed in my face, tossing a $500 catering bill onto my lap in front of our entire family. She loudly bragged that she and my brother were selling our family mountain resort to a corporate developer for $4.5 million. She told me to pay for the barbecue ribs since they were moving into a new tax bracket, and I was just a paper pusher. I simply smiled and handed the terrified caterer my black American Express card. What Chloe did not know was that I had secretly bought the resort deed 5 years ago to save my parents from bankruptcy. My brother was not an owner. He was my salaried employee, and they had absolutely no idea what was waiting for them at the closing table. The crisp white paper of the catering invoice fluttered slightly in the heavy, humid Atlanta air before landing dead center on my lap. A sudden, suffocating silence fell over the immediate vicinity of the stone patio. Cousins and aunts who had been cheering just seconds ago suddenly found the tips of their expensive summer shoes absolutely fascinating. They were holding their collective breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. They were waiting for the angry, bitter black woman stereotype that my family so desperately wanted to cast me in whenever I was forced to defend myself against their relentless disrespect. I absolutely refused to give them the satisfaction. I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice a fraction of a decibel. I did not even flinch. I let the printed invoice sit there on the fabric of my trousers for a long, calculated moment, simply looking up at Chloe's triumphant, brightly painted smile. The thick smell of hickory smoked brisket and barbecue sauce suddenly felt nauseatingly sweet, but I kept my breathing perfectly measured and shallow. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into the deep side pocket of my tailored silk blazer and pulled out my leather wallet. I bypassed the neatly folded cash. I bypassed the standard corporate platinum cards. I smoothly extracted the heavy, solid metal matte black American Express card. The dark titanium caught the harsh afternoon sunlight as I deliberately placed it directly on top of the insulting invoice. Without breaking eye contact with my sister-in-law, I pushed the metal card across the smooth glass surface of the patio table toward the waiting caterer. The young man in the black uniform polo shirt looked completely terrified, trapped in the middle of a vicious family crossfire. But he quickly scooped up the heavy card and the paper receipt, turning away hastily to process the transaction before anyone could speak. Chloe let out a sharp, theatrical scoff that carried perfectly over the sudden quiet of the backyard. She crossed her thin arms, leaning her weight heavily onto one hip as she stared down at me. Putting barbecue ribs on credit Kendra, she asked, her voice dripping with weaponized concern and dripping with fake Southern charm. You really do not have to put yourself into crippling debt just to save face in front of the extended family. We all know things are incredibly tight for you working at that little boutique firm down in the city. I simply offered you a chance to pitch in and feel like part of the team today. If a $500 catering charge is going to completely bounce your checking account, Trey and I can just cover it out of our new petty cash fund. I offered her a serene, practically chilling smile in return. It was the exact same unbothered smile I utilized whenever a desperate corporate rival tried to lowball me during a hostile merger negotiation. It is completely handled, Chloe, I said, keeping my tone as light and refreshing as a summer breeze. Consider it my personal contribution to your big historic celebration. I just want absolutely everyone to enjoy themselves today, without worrying about the small change. I knew exactly what she was thinking as she stared at me. In her narrow mind, I was the struggling, lonely spinster sister, stretching her meager middle-class salary to pretend she belonged in the same wealthy stratosphere as her and her brilliant husband. She had absolutely no idea that the thick piece of metal the caterer had just swiped was an exclusive invitation-only card requiring a minimum annual spend that far exceeded her entire yearly household allowance. She saw exactly what she wanted to see, which was a helpless victim. Before Chloe could launch another thinly veiled insult, my mother stepped decisively into the center of the patio. Vivian Washington possessed an uncanny radar for interpersonal tension, and instead of diffusing the awkwardness, she always knew exactly how to redirect the spotlight back to where she believed it rightfully belonged. She tapped a heavy silver serving spoon against her crystal champagne flute, her thick diamond tennis bracelets catching the afternoon light and chiming softly against the glass. "Everyone, please!" she called out, her voice projecting with the practiced, effortless authority of a seasoned Atlanta socialite. "Let us not get distracted by the little trivial details today. We are here to celebrate a truly monumental achievement for the Washington family legacy." My mother turned her back to me completely and intentionally blocking me out of the family inner circle as she reached out to grasp Trey firmly by the shoulder. She pulled my brother forward, presenting him to the crowd of relatives and neighbors like a conquering hero, returning victorious from a grueling war. Trey always had the real business mind in this family, she declared loudly, making absolutely sure her voice carried clearly over the fading rhythm and blues music playing from the outdoor speakers. From the time he was just a little boy, we knew he had the unique vision and the sheer drive to take our legacy to the next level. Passing the mountain resort operations to him was the right choice to build our generational wealth. This incredible $4.5 million sale is absolute proof that trusting your sons is the greatest investment a parent can ever make. The crowd murmured in deep agreement, raising their plastic cups and crystal glasses once more. To Trey, they echoed loudly, clapping and cheering, as if he had just cured a major disease. Trey puffed out his broad chest, standing significantly taller beside our beaming mother. He soaked up the loud validation like parched, cracked earth drinking in a torrential rainstorm. He looked around the crowded yard wearing an expression of absolute smug superiority, accepting heavy pats on the back from older uncles who had previously written him off as a reckless, unreliable gambler. I sat frozen in my patio chair, watching the entire delusional display unfold before my eyes. The sheer burning injustice of it flared in my chest, a sharp physical ache that I had learned to swallow down violently years ago. I had spent my entire adult life working relentlessly for that exact look of pure pride from my mother. I had sacrificed my weekends, my 20s, and my peace of mind to build a spotless, prestigious career in wealth management. I had climbed the steep corporate ladder in a ruthless, male-dominated industry, earning every single promotion and every massive bonus through sheer, undeniable competence and sleepless nights. Yet here was Trey receiving the ultimate crown of familial glory for a financial success he had absolutely no part in actually creating. He was being wildly celebrated for hitting a spectacular home run when he had not even stepped up to the plate. I slowly shifted my gaze from his gloating, flushed face down to the patio table where Chloe had casually discarded the glossy corporate prospectus she had been proudly parading around to the guests. The thick, professionally bound folder featured the bold, silver-embossed logo of Sterling Developments. The crisp, heavy pages were filled with high-resolution architectural mock-ups of sprawling luxury condos, massive paved parking lots, and pristine private golf courses intended to completely replace the rustic natural charm of our family resort. They were eagerly selling our heritage to a massive concrete paving machine and expecting me to sit quietly and applaud the total destruction of the land my grandfather had originally purchased. The sheer blinding arrogance of it all was staggering. They honestly deeply believed they held all the power in this dynamic. They genuinely believed they were the brilliant masters of their own destiny, about to cash a massive corporate check that would permanently elevate them above me forever. I let them have their fleeting, glorious moment. I let the loud cheers and the clinking glasses wash over me, offering the crowd nothing but a mild, placid expression of sisterly support. The terrified caterer finally returned, slipping the black metal card discreetly back onto the table right beside my resting hand. I picked it up smoothly, slid it back into my blazer pocket, and stood up slowly from my chair. Absolutely no one noticed me rise. They were all far too busy flocking around Trey and Chloe, eager to touch the hem of the newly minted millionaires. I smoothly turned my back on the sickening celebration and walked quietly toward the house. I stepped through the heavy sliding glass doors, leaving the oppressive Georgia heat and the loud, ignorant cheers behind me. The massive kitchen was an immediate oasis of cool air conditioning and pristine polished marble countertops. The exact moment the heavy glass door sealed shut behind me, blocking out the noise of the barbecue, my calm, collected facade dropped entirely. The placid, accommodating sister vanished completely, replaced by the ruthless, calculating chief executive they had absolutely no idea they were currently dealing with. I pulled my phone from my blazer pocket, my fingers moving with rapid, practiced precision. I bypassed my regular contacts and opened my heavily encrypted messaging app, pulling up the secure thread with Elias, my lead corporate attorney, and one of the most feared litigators in the city. I did not waste time with pleasantries or context. I typed out the harsh reality of the current situation. They just publicly announced the sale of the Blue Ridge property to Sterling Developments. Let them set the trap. Let them celebrate and spend money they do not have. We snap it shut at the closing table. I slip my phone back into my pocket just as the heavy swinging door of the kitchen pushes violently open. The rhythmic thumping of the bass from the backyard is momentarily loud before the door swings shut, trapping me in the pristine white space with my mother. Vivian Washington stands there with her hands planted firmly on her hips, her chest heaving slightly. Her silk summer blouse is perfectly pressed, and her signature pearl necklace catches the recessed lighting overhead. She does not look like a woman whose daughter just saved her from profound public embarrassment. She looks absolutely furious. I brace myself, expecting a quiet thank you, or perhaps a simple acknowledgement that Chloe crossed a massive, inappropriate line out there on the patio. Instead, my mother glares at me with a mixture of profound disappointment and deep visceral irritation. "Why could you not just be happy for your brother?" she demands, her voice, a harsh, sharp whisper designed to stay within the confines of the marble walls. I stare at her, genuinely taken aback by the immediate attack. "I just paid a $500 catering bill that your daughter-in-law literally threw in my lap," I reply, keeping my voice low but incredibly firm. "I did not make a scene, Mom. I handled it quietly and quickly so Trey could have his precious moment in the sun." "You always have that cold, judging look on your face," Vivian snaps, stepping closer and pointing an accusing manicured finger directly at my chest. "Do not think I did not see you glaring from the patio while everyone else was celebrating. You marched in here like a dark storm cloud trying to pull focus away from him. You need to learn how to support your family, Kendra. It is not always about you and your little corporate ego." The sheer profound injustice of her words feels like a physical blow to my ribs. My little corporate ego. I am a senior wealth management advisor who works 80-hour weeks without complaint. I manage portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars for clients who trust my financial expertise with their entire lives. Yet in this house, standing on this expensive hardwood floor, I am nothing but a bitter spinster who refuses to clap loudly enough for the golden child. "I support this family," I say, my voice dropping an octave as the years of suppressed burning frustration finally begin to boil over the edge. I supported Trey when he dropped out of his master program because the professors were too demanding. I supported him when he wanted to start that failed logistics company and needed someone to co-sign the lease. I support you every single time you need someone to clean up his massive financial messes behind the scenes. Vivian scoffs, waving her hand through the air as if swatting away a pesky, annoying insect. "You are just jealous," she says, her tone dripping with absolute, unadulterated condescension. "You have always been terribly jealous of Trey because he is building something real and tangible. He is out there making massive deals and securing our future, while you sit in a sterile cubicle judging him for actually taking risks. You should be down on your knees thanking him for elevating the Washington name today." I take a slow, deliberate step toward her, closing the physical distance between us. The polished marble island is the only thing separating us now. I do not give a long, winding monologue about my painful childhood. The bitter, lethal truth bleeds out of me in rapid-fire precision strikes. Taking risks, I repeat the words, tasting like absolute poison on my tongue. Mom, do you genuinely want to talk about Trey taking risks? Let us talk about exactly what happened 5 years ago. Her eyes dart nervously toward the swinging door, a sudden flash of genuine panic crossing her perfectly made-up face. She does not want anyone in the yard to hear this conversation. Keep your voice down, she hisses, stepping backward. But I absolutely refuse to back off. 5 years ago, Trey took over the Blue Ridge property because he convinced you and Dad he was a hospitality visionary. I say my words, clipping the air like a relentless metronome. And what exactly did his brilliant business vision accomplish within 24 short months? He completely ignored the severe structural issues with the main guest cabins. He alienated the loyal long-term staff until they all quit in protest. He completely stopped paying the local maintenance vendors. He ran a highly profitable, beloved family staple straight into the ground and buried you and Dad in $2 million of crippling toxic debt. Vivian grips the edge of the marble counter, her knuckles turning stark white under the pressure. That was the economy, she fires back immediately, regurgitating the exact fabricated excuse Trey had spoon-fed them for years. It was a severe market downturn. Absolutely no one could have predicted the sudden shift in mountain tourism. It was sheer staggering incompetence, I correct her, refusing to let the systemic gaslighting stand for another second. The regional market was booming at that exact time. Every other single resort in the Blue Ridge Mountains was posting record-breaking profits, while Trey was quietly buying expensive imported sports cars on the company dime. Do you remember the certified bank notices, Mom? Do you remember when Fulton County Bank threatened to foreclose on this exact house to cover his defaulted business loans? You were sitting crying at this very kitchen island, terrified you were going to be living out of a suitcase by Christmas. I watch her swallow hard, her throat working nervously. The traumatic memory of that dark, terrifying month is clearly still there, buried deep beneath her fierce maternal denial. But her blind loyalty to her son easily overrides her basic grasp on reality. She squares her shoulders, thrusting her chin stubbornly into the air. We went through a rough patch, she admits stiffly, her eyes flashing with defensive pride. Every great family business endures severe growing pains. But Trey fixed it. He took full responsibility like a man, and he found a way out. He hustled and pitched and secured our salvation when things looked grim. I stare at her, trying to fathom the deep, endless depth of her delusion. He found a way out, I ask, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet pitch. Yes, Kendra, he certainly did. Vivian snaps, her voice ringing with absolute, unwavering conviction. He found that silent corporate angel investor. He networked and negotiated relentlessly until a massive private holding company saw his incredible market potential and agreed to bail out the entire property. They cleared the $2 million debt in one swift payment and kept him on as the lead property manager because they knew his fundamental vision was right all along. They trusted him when you never would. Vivian takes a deep, ragged breath, smoothing the front of her silk blouse as if physically brushing away the unpleasant truth I had just presented to her. You were so incredibly busy with your precious career back then, she continues, her tone turning sharp and deeply vindictive. When we were drowning in bank notices and active foreclosure threats, where were you? You were hiding in your expensive high-rise apartment, refusing to dip into your personal savings to help your own flesh and blood. You turned your back on us when we needed you most. I stand perfectly still, letting the sheer, staggering audacity of her accusation wash over me completely. I remember those desperate, agonizing weeks vividly. I remember the endless, sleepless nights sitting at my kitchen table, crunching numbers, running complex financial models, and realizing that handing my parents raw cash would only result in Trey squandering every single penny of it again. I knew then that the absolute only way to truly save them was to completely remove my brother from the ownership equation, while simultaneously saving his fragile male ego so my parents would not completely shatter from the shame. Trey saved this family, Vivian says, stepping closer and pointing her finger at my face again. He found that generous corporate investor all by himself. He saved this very house while you did absolutely nothing but sit back and watch us struggle. You have zero right to judge him today. He is about to close a historic $4.5 million deal and prove every single hater wrong. The loud rhythmic music from the backyard swells slightly as someone turns up the outdoor volume. A massive burst of laughter erupts from the stone patio, followed by the distinct sharp sound of clinking champagne glasses. They are out there right now, toasting the golden boy. They are out there passionately celebrating his phantom victory and his non-existent business acumen. I look closely at my mother. I look at the fierce protective fire burning in her eyes as she fiercely defends the son who nearly left her entirely homeless, while viciously attacking the daughter who silently sacrificed everything she had to save her. A cold, profound, absolute calm settles deep into my bones, anchoring my feet to the floor. I do not feel the urge to argue anymore. I do not feel the desperate, agonizing need to scream or defend my character to someone committed to misunderstanding me. I look at her and I simply nod my head. You are absolutely right, Mom, I say, my voice completely devoid of any anger or emotion. Trey found a very generous investor. He really did. Vivian blinks, clearly surprised by my sudden, unexpected capitulation. She fully expected a screaming fight, and my calm, quiet agreement completely throws her off balance. She lifts her chin, a triumphant, satisfied smirk, finally breaking through her lingering anger. I am genuinely glad you can finally admit the truth, she says, turning swiftly toward the swinging kitchen door. Now fix your face and come back outside. Try to act like you actually belong in this family for once. She pushes aggressively through the heavy wooden door, leaving me standing entirely alone in the pristine, quiet kitchen. I stand there listening to her heels click sharply against the patio stones as she rejoins the loud celebration. I look down at my hands resting against the cool, smooth marble of the kitchen island. She sneered that Trey found the investor and saved them, while I did absolutely nothing. She has absolutely no idea that the silent corporate angel investor who cleared their $2 million debt is Onyx Holdings. She has no idea that Onyx Holdings is my private limited liability company. I own every single inch of the Blue Ridge Mountain property. I hold the exclusive unencumbered legal deed. Trey is not a visionary owner preparing for a multi-million-dollar corporate payout. Trey is just my salaried employee, and I am about to fire him. The heavy wooden door swings completely shut, cutting off the loud cheers from the backyard and leaving me alone in the pristine quiet of the kitchen. I stand frozen against the marble counter, taking a long, slow breath to steady my racing heart. My mother actually believes Trey is a financial genius. She genuinely believes he manifested a corporate investor out of thin air to save our family from total ruin. The sheer absurdity of it is almost suffocating. I look down at my hands resting on the cold stone surface, marveling at the deep web of lies my brother has successfully spun over the last 5 years. He has taken my silent sacrifice and completely repackaged it as his own triumph. Before I can fully process the bitter sting of my mother's absolute rejection, the kitchen door swings open once again. The bright afternoon sunlight floods the room for a split second before the door shuts behind my sister-in-law. Chloe struts into the room holding her empty crystal mimosa glass, her face flushed with alcohol and the intoxicating thrill of being the center of attention. She is wearing a flowing designer sundress that I know for a fact costs more than my parents' monthly mortgage payment. She does not immediately notice me standing in the shadows near the pantry. She hums a cheerful, upbeat tune as she practically dances over to the stainless steel refrigerator, pulling open the heavy door to retrieve a fresh bottle of imported champagne. When she finally turns around and spots me leaning against the counter, she lets out a sharp, exaggerated gasp, pressing her hand flat against her chest. "Kendra, you absolutely startled me," she says, her voice unnecessarily loud and shrill. "What on earth are you doing hiding in the dark kitchen while the rest of us are out there celebrating our massive victory? You are missing all the fun." I watch her pop the cork on the champagne bottle and pour the bubbling liquid into her glass. "I just needed a moment of quiet," I reply, keeping my tone completely neutral. Chloe takes a long, satisfied sip of her drink and leans her hip against the kitchen island. She looks me up and down, her eyes scanning my tailored crimson blazer and my perfectly pressed trousers. A patronizing, sympathetic smile slowly spreads across her face. It is the exact same smile she uses whenever she wants to deliver an incredibly vicious insult wrapped in a layer of fake Southern concern. I know today must be really difficult for you, Kendra, she says, setting her glass down and crossing her thin arms. It is perfectly fine if you need to take a minute to process everything. Seeing Trey succeed on such a massive, unprecedented scale has to bring up a lot of complicated feelings for you. I do not say a single word. I just stare at her, allowing the heavy silence to stretch between us. In the corporate world, silence is a highly effective weapon. It forces the other person to keep talking to fill the void, and they almost always reveal too much. Chloe takes the bait immediately, stepping closer with a look of profound, condescending pity in her eyes. I talk to my friends about you all the time, she continues, her voice dripping with artificial empathy. We all agree that it must be so incredibly hard. Being a strong, independent Black woman in the corporate world is a great look for a magazine cover, but in reality, it just leaves you so isolated. You work yourself to the bone at that little financial firm of yours, but at the end of the day, what do you actually have to show for it? You do not have a husband, you do not have children, you do not have a real lasting legacy. You are just existing day to day, pushing papers around a desk. The sheer weight of her racial microaggressions and boundless entitlement threatens to pull the oxygen right out of the room. She is a woman who has never worked a traditional 40-hour week in her entire adult life. She married into my family, maxed out my brother's credit cards, and now spends her days lounging at the country club while pretending to be a self-made entrepreneur. Yet she stands here in my parents' kitchen, casually dissecting my life choices with the unearned confidence of a billionaire mogul. Trey and I are building a genuine empire, Chloe says, picking up her glass again and taking another victorious sip. This $4.5 million sale is just the first step. We are creating generational wealth for our future children. We are cementing the Washington family name in the real estate industry. I just wish you could find a way to be happy for us, instead of letting your jealousy consume you. It is not healthy, Kendra. It really is not. I maintain my absolute composure. I do not let a single muscle in my face twitch. I do not tell her that the only reason she has a country club membership is because I secretly pay the exorbitant monthly dues to keep my parents from looking bad in front of their wealthy friends. I do not tell her that the empire she thinks she is building is actually a fragile house of cards resting entirely in the palm of my hand. I let her dig her own grave deeper and deeper with every arrogant word that falls from her lips. I am not jealous, Chloe. I say, my voice remaining completely flat and devoid of emotion. I simply have a different definition of success. Chloe rolls her eyes, tossing her head back with a dramatic, condescending laugh. Oh, please, Kendra, she scoffs, dismissing my response entirely. You can try to dress it up however you want, but the truth is plain as day. You are bitter because Trey is the one bringing home the millions, while you are stuck paying catering bills just to feel relevant. As she dramatically flips her hair over her shoulder, she turns sharply to grab her oversized designer tote bag from the edge of the kitchen island. Her sudden jerky movement catches the heavy leather strap on the corner of the marble countertop. The expensive bag tips over heavily, spilling its contents across the pristine tiled floor. A gold-plated makeup compact, a set of luxury car keys, a tube of expensive lipstick, and a thick, bulging manila folder hit the ground with a loud, uncoordinated clatter. Oh, for heaven's sake, Chloe mutters, dropping to her knees in a clumsy, frantic panic to gather her belongings. I take a slow step forward and kneel down onto the tile to help her. It is an automatic, polite response, but as my hands reach out to gather the scattered papers sliding across the floor, my entire world suddenly screeches to a violent, grinding halt. My eyes are highly trained to read complex financial documents faster than the average person can read a restaurant menu. I spend my entire life analyzing balance sheets, identifying market trends, and catching microscopic accounting errors that other wealth managers completely miss. So when my eyes lock onto the crisp white bank statement that has slipped out of the manila folder, my brain instantly registers every single detail before Chloe can even attempt to grab it. The document features the official logo of the Blue Ridge Mountain Resort operating account. This is the exact bank account that I legally fund every single month through my private holding company to ensure the resort staff gets paid and the property remains functional. It is my money. But the columns of numbers printed on this specific statement make absolutely no logical sense. There are no standard vendor payments listed. There are no payroll disbursements. There are no equipment maintenance fees or property tax allocations. Instead, I see a devastating pattern of massive outgoing wire transfers. $10,000 here, $25,000 there, $50,000 routed out just last Tuesday. My eyes dart to the right side of the page, tracing the destination of these massive unapproved withdrawals. The money is not going to any local mountain suppliers or corporate contractors. The funds are being wired directly into an offshore banking institution located in the Cayman Islands. And the sole listed beneficiary on that international routing number is Chloe Washington. A cold, paralyzing realization washes over my entire body, pinning me to the kitchen floor. Chloe is not just a spoiled, entitled woman playing the role of a wealthy socialite. She is an active, sophisticated criminal. For months, possibly even years, she has been systematically siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the resort operating account and funneling it completely offshore. She is bleeding my private company completely dry right under her husband's nose. Chloe lets out a sharp, terrified gasp. She lunges forward, her manicured fingernails scraping against the tile as she violently snatches the bank statement right out of my hand. Her face, previously flushed with alcohol and arrogant pride, is now completely drained of all color. She shoves the papers back into the manila folder with frantic, shaking hands, clutching it tightly to her chest like a physical shield. "Do not touch my personal things," she snaps, her voice trembling with a sudden, undeniable terror. She scrambles backwards, struggling to get her footing on the slick floor. I stand up slowly, towering over her as she cowers against the lower kitchen cabinets. I do not say a word about what I just saw. I do not accuse her of theft. I do not demand an explanation for the offshore wire transfers. I just look down at her terrified, wide eyes, locking all of the damning financial information permanently into my photographic memory. The dates, the routing numbers, the exact dollar amounts. I have everything I need. She has not just been mismanaging the property budget. She has been actively embezzling a massive fortune directly from my pocket. And suddenly, the impending corporate sale makes perfect, terrifying sense. They are desperate to sell the resort to Sterling Developments, not just to get rich, but to completely cover up the massive, glaring financial hole Chloe has dug before a legitimate corporate audit can expose her federal crimes. "You should really be more careful with your personal files, Chloe," I say, my voice dropping to a low, chilling register. "You never know what kind of sensitive information might accidentally slip out." Before she can formulate a response, before she can even attempt to lie her way out of the disaster she just created, the heavy wooden door to my father's private study swings open down the hallway. My father, Andre, steps out into the corridor, his face dark and furious, calling my name with a booming, aggressive authority that demands immediate obedience. The embezzlement will have to wait, because the ambush has officially begun. The heavy swinging door of the kitchen pushes violently open momentarily, letting in the rhythmic thumping bass from the backyard before sealing shut. I am left standing in the pristine, quiet kitchen, staring at the manila folder and the damning bank statements now safely memorized in my mind. Chloe has just scrambled out, terrified that I have uncovered her massive offshore embezzlement scheme. She has been bleeding the resort's operating account dry, funneling tens of thousands of dollars into a Cayman Islands account under her own name. Before I can even begin to process the sheer scale of her federal crimes, a booming, aggressive voice echoes down the long corridor. "Kendra." My father, Andre Washington, does not ask for my presence. He commands it. He stands in the hallway outside his private study, his face dark and furious, expecting immediate, unquestioning obedience from the daughter he has always treated like an inconvenient afterthought. I take a slow, measured breath, smoothing the lapels of my crimson silk blazer. I let the cold, absolute certainty of my hidden power settle deep into my bones before I walk down the hallway to face the firing squad. The air inside my father's private study is heavy and stagnant, thick with the suffocating scent of aged leather, expensive cigars, and boundless arrogance. This room has always been a dedicated shrine to the Washington family patriarchs, a place where I was only ever summoned to be reprimanded or dismissed. The walls are lined with dark walnut bookshelves displaying dusty legal volumes and framed photographs. Every single silver frame showcases Trey. There is Trey holding his high school baseball trophy, Trey smiling widely at his college graduation, Trey shaking hands with local politicians. There is not a single photograph of me in this entire room. I step onto the plush Persian rug and immediately take in the hostile geography of the space. My father sits heavily behind his massive mahogany desk, his hands clasped tightly together over a stack of pristine legal documents. My mother Vivian stands dutifully right behind his leather chair, acting as his silent enforcer. Trey and Chloe are already sitting in the two oversized wingback chairs directly in front of the desk, posing like absolute royalty holding court. Chloe has miraculously managed to paint a smug, confident smirk back onto her face, although her hands are still trembling slightly where they rest rigidly on her lap. "Close the door, Kendra," my father orders without offering me a seat. He does not even look up to meet my eyes, choosing instead to aggressively straighten the thick stack of papers on his desk. I push the heavy oak door shut behind me, the solid thud echoing loudly in the tense silence of the room. I remain standing, keeping my posture perfectly straight and my expression entirely unreadable. I am looking at a room full of people who are absolutely convinced they hold my entire future in their hands. They have absolutely no idea that I am the one holding the match to their delicate house of cards. We need to handle a minor administrative issue before the caterers serve the main course. My father begins, his voice dripping with forced casual authority. As you know, your brother has successfully negotiated an incredible deal with Sterling Developments. It is a highly complex, multi-million-dollar corporate acquisition that requires an immense amount of sophisticated paperwork. Sterling is a massive entity, and they demand absolute perfection before they wire any funds. I watch him slide a thick, crisp document across the polished surface of the mahogany desk. The top page features the bold, aggressive letterhead of Sterling Developments. Right below that, in heavy black ink, are the words, "Family Waiver of Rights." My mother steps out from behind the desk, her silk blouse rustling softly in the quiet room. She crosses her arms over her chest, fixing me with a sharp, warning glare. "Because the original family trust was established decades ago," Vivian explains smoothly, taking over the pitch seamlessly from my father, "it still lists you as a nominal legacy beneficiary on the old pre-bankruptcy deeds. It is merely an outdated legal formality, Kendra. A simple oversight from when your grandfather originally structured the estate. However, the corporate attorneys at Sterling are incredibly thorough. They are demanding a completely clean title before they finalize the $4.5 million transfer." My father taps a heavy gold pen against the document. "They need your signature on this waiver to clear any potential lingering title clouds," he says, his tone implying that my signature is nothing more than a trivial annoyance standing in the way of their historic victory. "It simply states that you formally relinquish any and all historical claims to the Blue Ridge property. It is just a formality, Kendra. Your brother has worked tirelessly to earn this massive sale. He single-handedly resurrected that resort from the brink of absolute ruin and found the investors to save our legacy. Do not be difficult about this. Do not be difficult." The phrase rings in my ears like a familiar toxic bell. For my entire life, being difficult simply meant refusing to let them walk all over me. It meant demanding basic respect. It meant refusing to blindly worship at the altar of my brother's mediocrity. I look down at the heavy gold pen resting on top of the waiver. I do not reach for it. I am just trying to understand the exact mechanics of this transaction. I say, my voice perfectly level and deceptively calm. If Trey is the sole visionary owner who completely saved the property, why does a massive corporate buyer care about a nominal legacy clause from an outdated trust? If the title is truly clear, why do they need my explicit legal consent to proceed? Trey lets out a loud, aggressive sigh, shifting his considerable weight in the leather wingback chair. He runs a hand over his freshly trimmed beard, looking up at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. Jesus, Kendra, do you always have to make every single thing about yourself? He snaps, his voice echoing harshly in the confined space. Are you really going to stand here and try to hold up a multi-million-dollar corporate acquisition just because you are jealous of my success? Sterling is a massive publicly traded company. They do not take risks with old family trusts. They want every single loose end tied up before they release the capital. My legal team assured them this waiver would be signed today. Your legal team, I ask, tilting my head slightly. The same legal team that failed to notice your wife funneling tens of thousands of dollars into an offshore account. I do not say the words out loud. I keep them locked securely behind my teeth, letting the sweet anticipation of the coming slaughter warm my blood. Yes, my legal team. Trey barks, completely oblivious to the trap he is currently sitting in. The lawyers who are managing the transition. I have investors to answer to, Kendra. I have a massive empire to build. I do not have time to stand here and explain basic corporate law to a mid-level paper pusher who has never closed a real deal in her life. My mother steps closer to me, her eyes narrowing into hostile slits. She places a firm, heavy hand on my shoulder, attempting to physically intimidate me into submission. Kendra, she says, her voice low and threatening. Your brother is securing the financial future of this entire family. He is taking us into a completely new tax bracket while you are busy trying to find flaws in his achievement. You need to sign the document right now and stop trying to sabotage this celebration. We are not going to let your bitter attitude ruin the greatest day of his life. I look at my mother's hand gripping my shoulder. I look at her fierce, unwavering devotion to a son who has done nothing but lie, cheat, and squander every opportunity he was ever given. I look at my father, who refuses to even look me in the eye because he knows deep down that he is enabling a massive fraud. And then I look at Chloe, who is staring at me with wide, terrified eyes, silently begging me not to mention the offshore bank statements she dropped on the kitchen floor. I slowly reach up and remove my mother's hand from my shoulder. I do it with such gentle, absolute authority that she actually takes a stunned step backward. I am not trying to ruin anything, Mom. I say, my voice ringing with a cold, chilling clarity. I just like to know exactly what I am signing away before I put my name on a binding legal contract. In my line of work, we call that basic due diligence. Trey suddenly stands up, his large frame towering over the desk. His face is flushed an angry dark red, and the veins in his thick neck are visibly pulsing. He is completely losing his temper, unable to handle even the slightest bit of resistance to his grand, triumphant narrative. He snatches the heavy gold pen off the desk and violently shoves it directly into my hand, his fingers digging painfully into my palm. Just sign the damn paper, Kendra, he snarls, his breath hot and smelling sharply of expensive bourbon. You are acting like a bitter, childless spinster who just wants to sabotage my moment because your own life is completely empty. You have absolutely nothing going for you, so you want to drag us all down into your miserable little reality. You are not a stakeholder here. You are just a lingering annoyance. Sign the waiver so we can get back to my party. The sheer, vicious cruelty of his words hangs heavily in the stifling air of the study. My father watches me intently, waiting for me to break. My mother crosses her arms, looking incredibly satisfied that Trey finally put me in my rightful place. They all expect me to flinch. They expect me to lower my eyes, swallow the agonizing humiliation, and hastily scribble my signature just to escape the relentless, brutal pressure of their combined hostility. They genuinely believe they have cornered a frightened, helpless animal. They are completely wrong. I look down at the heavy gold pen gripped tightly in my hand. The smooth, cool metal feels solid against my skin. I look at the pristine white page of the Family Waiver of Rights, featuring the bold Sterling Developments logo at the very top. I look at the dotted line eagerly waiting for my submission. I do not sign the document. Instead, I maintain absolute unblinking eye contact with my brother as I slowly, deliberately place the gold pen back down onto the mahogany desk. I reach out and pick up the thick multi-page legal packet. I do not look at the front page. I smoothly, efficiently flip the entire document over, ignoring the waiver completely. I bypass the signature line and immediately begin sifting through the dense, complex legalese of the attached purchase agreement. What are you doing? My father demands, his voice suddenly pitching upward in genuine alarm. His chair squeaks loudly as he suddenly sits up straight. I told you that is just the standard corporate boilerplate. You do not need to read the addendums. I ignore his rising panic entirely. My eyes scan the fine print, absorbing the specific financial terms, the transfer dates, and the exact corporate entities involved in the $4.5 million transaction. I am searching for a very specific clause, a mandatory disclosure that every single legitimate real estate acquisition requires before closing. If Trey is the sole authorized seller of the Blue Ridge property, I say, my voice cutting through the thick tension in the room like a freshly sharpened scalpel. Then why does the primary purchasing agreement explicitly state that the closing funds must be placed into a mandatory escrow account, pending the final written approval of Onyx Holdings? The silence in the study becomes absolutely absolute. It is a heavy, suffocating vacuum that instantly sucks all the oxygen right out of the room. My father's face drains of all color, transforming into a pale, sickly gray. Trey freezes completely, his mouth slightly open, his angry red flush rapidly vanishing. My mother looks wildly between the three of us, clearly not understanding the massive legal bomb I have just casually dropped onto the center of the desk. I slowly look up from the document, locking my eyes directly onto my brother's terrified face. I offer him a smile that is pure, absolute ice. Who exactly is Onyx Holdings? Trey, I ask, my voice dangerously quiet. Because according to this corporate purchase agreement, Sterling Developments cannot buy this mountain resort from you. They have to buy it from the legal entity holding the primary deed. And you are not listed on that deed anywhere. Trey stammers, stepping backward until the back of his knees hit the leather wingback chair. He looks desperately at my father, seeking a lifeline that does not exist. I take a step forward, placing both of my hands flat on the mahogany desk, leaning in close. Let me read the fine print, I demand, letting my true power finally completely off the leash, because I think you are trying to sell something that does not actually belong to you. Trey lunges forward, his large hands desperately clawing across the polished mahogany desk to snatch the legal packet away from me. I anticipate the clumsy, aggressive movement perfectly. I step back, pulling the heavy stack of documents completely out of his reach. He crashes his weight against the edge of the desk, knocking over a heavy crystal paperweight that shatters against the hardwood floor. Give me that file, Kendra. He demands, his voice cracking with a high-pitched, desperate panic. You have absolutely no right to read confidential corporate documents. You are violating non-disclosure agreements. I will have my lawyers sue you into oblivion. I ignore his hollow, pathetic threats completely. My eyes fly across the densely packed paragraphs of the purchase agreement, rapidly processing the complex financial structures hidden within the dense corporate jargon. My years of grueling experience as a senior wealth management advisor allow me to instantly dissect the convoluted terms. I scan past the standard clauses detailing the ownership transfer. I bypass the basic liability waivers. My highly trained gaze locks onto a severely out-of-place addendum buried deep in the back pages labeled Schedule C. The sheer malicious audacity of the terms printed on the page makes my blood run completely cold. They are not just selling the Blue Ridge Mountain Resort. They are executing a massive, highly illegal financial cover-up right under my parents' noses. I look up from the crisp white paper, staring directly at my father. Andre Washington stands frozen near his leather chair, his posture rigid with defensive pride, but his eyes betraying a sudden deep-seated uncertainty. He looks from me to Trey and back again, desperately waiting for someone to restore the comfortable, triumphant narrative he had been enjoying just 10 minutes ago. Did you actually read this specific addendum, Dad? I ask, my voice sharp and cutting, slicing through the heavy tension in the study. Did you hire an independent lawyer to review Schedule C before you agreed to force me to sign away my legacy rights? My father bristles aggressively, immediately offended that I would question his competence. I do not need an outside lawyer to read a standard contract, he snaps, thrusting his chin forward. Trey walked us through the entire packet last night. It is a standard corporate closing fee. Sterling Developments requires a temporary liquidity hold to process the transfer of the commercial deeds. It is just temporary paperwork, Kendra. Temporary paperwork. I repeat the words, tasting like absolute ash. I step closer to the desk, slapping the specific page down onto the mahogany surface and pointing directly at the bolded text. This is not a temporary liquidity hold. Sterling Developments is not asking for closing fees. This is a $500,000 bridge financing loan originated by a predatory third-party lender. My mother lets out a harsh, dismissive scoff, stepping out from behind my father. You are just trying to confuse us with your fancy financial vocabulary, Kendra. Trey explained everything perfectly. The buyer just needs to verify our liquid assets before they wire the $4.5 million. We are simply demonstrating good faith liquidity to ensure the corporate transition goes smoothly. They are not verifying your assets, Mom. I say, refusing to break eye contact with my father. They are actively borrowing against them. This document legally authorizes Trey to take out a $500,000 loan at a staggering 18% interest rate. And do you want to know what the required collateral is for this massive, sudden influx of cash? The silence in the room is absolutely deafening. Only the muffled, heavy bass from the backyard barbecue penetrates the thick oak door, serving as a surreal soundtrack to the absolute destruction of our family dynamic. The collateral is this house, I say, my voice dropping to a lethal, quiet pitch. The deed to your primary residence. The house you have lived in for 30 years. If this loan is not repaid within 90 days, the lender has the absolute legal right to foreclose on this property and evict you. Trey and Chloe are mortgaging the literal roof over your head. My father physically recoils as if I have just struck him across the face. He looks at Trey, his brow furrowed in deep, angry confusion. Trey, what is she talking about? You told me the collateral clause was just standard corporate boilerplate for the commercial resort property. You promised me the family home was completely isolated from the business transaction. Trey is sweating profusely now. Large, damp patches are rapidly forming under the arms of his crisp, expensive linen shirt. He tugs frantically at his collar, looking like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. She is lying. Dad. He stammers, his voice raising an octave in raw, unadulterated panic. She is completely misreading the legal terminology. She is just a low-level paper pusher who does not understand high-level corporate acquisitions. The house is perfectly safe. It is just a temporary bridge loan to smooth out the final accounting discrepancies before closing. I laugh, a short, harsh sound completely devoid of humor. Accounting discrepancies. I repeat, stepping toward Chloe, who has practically pressed herself flat against the bookshelf in terror. Let us talk about those specific discrepancies right now. Let us talk about why you suddenly desperately need exactly $500,000 in raw, untraceable cash just days before a major corporate buyer takes over the resort properties. Chloe visibly flinches, her eyes darting toward the heavy study door, as if calculating her chances of simply running out of the house. Her hands are shaking violently. Sterling Developments is a massive publicly traded corporation. I explained to my parents, keeping my tone ruthlessly analytical. Before they finalize any multi-million-dollar acquisition, they send in a team of forensic accountants to conduct a brutal deep-dive audit of the target company. They review every single bank statement, every vendor invoice, and every payroll ledger from the last 5 years. They are coming to inspect the resort operating account next week. My mother crosses her arms tightly, her face a mask of stubborn, furious denial. And they will find a perfectly healthy business, she insists, fiercely defending her golden son. Trey has worked miracles with that property. He increased the overall valuation by millions. They will find a massive, gaping financial crater. I correct her, slamming my hand down on the desk, because Chloe has been actively embezzling money from the operating account for months. I saw the bank statements she dropped in the kitchen. I saw the offshore wire transfers routed directly to the Cayman Islands under her sole name. She has stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars right under your noses to fund her country club lifestyle. Chloe lets out a strangled, terrified sob, covering her mouth with her trembling hands. She looks at Trey, silently begging him to fix the unfixable disaster she has engineered. Trey steps forward, attempting to shield his wife, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "Shut your mouth, Kendra," he screams, spit flying from his lips. "You are making up insane, psychotic lies because you cannot stand the fact that I am successful. Chloe has never touched a single dime of that money. You are just trying to ruin my life because you have absolutely nothing going for yourself." "You are going to federal prison," I say, looking directly at Chloe, completely ignoring my brother's frantic yelling. "When the Sterling corporate auditors discover the missing funds, they will instantly kill the acquisition deal. Then they will immediately notify the federal authorities. Wire fraud and corporate embezzlement carry mandatory minimum sentencing. You are trying to steal my parents' house to secretly replace the stolen money before the auditors arrive. You are using their home to cover up your federal crimes." My father steps forward, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he reaches for the legal document on the desk. He puts on his reading glasses, his eyes scanning the dense paragraphs. His breathing becomes incredibly shallow and rapid as he reads the specific collateral terms I pointed out. The undeniable legal reality is right there in black and white ink. The address of his home is listed plainly under the schedule of seized assets. "Trey," he says, his voice cracking with a sudden devastating vulnerability. "Is this true? Did you put the house up for collateral without telling me the truth? Did you trick me into signing away my home?" Trey does not answer the question. He cannot look his father in the eye. Instead, he turns his absolute blazing fury onto me. "This is entirely your fault," he bellows, his hands balling into massive trembling fists. "If you had just supported me 5 years ago, if you had just given me the capital I needed instead of hiding in the city, I would not have had to resort to creative accounting. I had to keep up appearances. I had to maintain the lifestyle everyone expects from this family. You forced us into this corner by being a selfish hoarder." "Creative accounting!" I scoff, shaking my head in pure, unadulterated disgust. "You ran a multi-million-dollar business into the ground, and your wife robbed it blind to buy designer handbags and luxury vacations. And now you are totally willing to leave our parents completely homeless just to save your own pathetic skin." My mother suddenly steps between us, her eyes flashing with a desperate, blinding anger. She utterly refuses to accept the reality staring her directly in the face. She cannot physically process the fact that her perfect golden child is a thief and a fraud. Her brain rejects the information entirely, snapping back into its most comfortable, familiar defense mechanism, blaming me. "Stop it!" she screams, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "Stop telling these vicious, disgusting lies about your brother. Trey has always done what is best for this family. You are deliberately twisting the paperwork to make him look bad. You have always hated him. You have always wanted to see him fail. He is just trying to secure a bridge loan to help the transition." I stare at the woman who brought me into this world, completely staggered by her absolute commitment to her own delusion. "I just proved to you that he is stealing your home," I say, my voice dropping to a harsh, ragged whisper. "I just showed you the legal proof that he is mortgaging your entire life to cover up a felony, and you are still defending him. You are willing to live on the street just to protect his ego." Trey steps up right beside our mother, his chest puffed out, feeling suddenly emboldened by her blind, unwavering support. He thinks he has won. He thinks the family dynamic will shield him from the absolute destruction he has caused. He actually thinks he can still force this through. I look my father dead in the eye, completely ignoring the chaotic noise coming from my brother and my mother. I point a steady, unwavering finger directly at the specific bridge loan clause on the desk, ensuring he understands the gravity of the situation. "Do you realize they are mortgaging the roof over your head to cover stolen money?" Trey turns a deep, furious purple, the veins in his neck bulging as he screams at the top of his lungs. "Sign the paper or get out of this house." The violent echo of my brother's scream bounces off the dark walnut bookshelves and settles heavily into the thick Persian rug. His chest is heaving, his fists clench so tightly his knuckles are completely white. He expects me to flinch. He expects the sheer volume of his voice to shatter my resolve just like it has always done in this house. Instead, I maintain my absolute terrifying calm. I hold his panicked gaze for one long, agonizing second. I slowly open my fingers and intentionally drop the heavy gold pen. It hits the polished mahogany surface of my father's desk with a sharp, definitive crack that sounds louder than a gunshot in the stagnant air of the study. It rolls slowly across the smooth wood crossing over the Sterling Development's purchase agreement and finally comes to a stop against the edge of the leather desk pad. I step back, placing physical distance between myself and the fraudulent paperwork. I am not signing anything, I state, my voice dropping to a low, icy register that leaves absolutely no room for negotiation or debate. Before my father can even process the finality of my refusal, Chloe completely shatters. The terrified silence she had been maintaining vanishes, replaced by a sudden feral desperation. She realizes that if I walk out of this room without signing that waiver, the corporate audit will proceed, her offshore accounts will be exposed, and she will be trading her designer sundresses for a federal prison jumpsuit. Her survival instinct kicks in, and she immediately goes on the vicious offensive, using the only weapon she has ever truly mastered: character assassination. "You are such a pathetic, ungrateful leech," Chloe screams, stepping out from the shadow of the bookshelf and aggressively pointing a trembling finger directly at my face. "You are just a bitter, jealous woman who cannot stand the fact that Trey is building an incredible legacy while you have absolutely nothing. You have no husband, you have no family, and you have no real power. So you come in here and you make up these insane, psychotic lies about me to ruin our moment. You are trying to destroy our marriage because you are so incredibly jealous of what we have." I simply stare at her, watching the frantic, ugly panic twist her perfectly contoured face. Her voice is shrill and grating, echoing off the framed photographs of Trey's supposed triumphs. She steps closer, emboldened by my silence, desperately trying to spin a protective web of lies for my parents to believe. She is just trying to sabotage the sale because she wants the money for herself. Chloe continues, turning her desperate, pleading eyes toward my father. "Andre, you know how she is. She has always resented Trey. She has always hated the fact that you chose him to run the business. She knows that this bridge loan is a totally normal corporate fee, but she is twisting the legal words to make it look like a crime. She is trying to turn you against your own son so she can swoop in and claim the profits from the Sterling deal. You cannot let her do this to us. You cannot let her ruin everything we have worked so hard to build." The sheer audacity of her projection is almost impressive. She is standing in a room actively attempting to steal my parents' primary residence to cover up her massive embezzlement, and she is flawlessly playing the victim. She knows exactly how to manipulate the deep-seated biases that have governed this family for 3 decades. She knows that my father will always without fail choose the narrative that protects his golden son. My father stands up from his leather chair. The movement is slow, heavy, and fraught with a dark, suffocating anger. He places both of his hands flat on the mahogany desk, leaning forward so that his face is only inches from mine. The uncertainty that had briefly flickered in his eyes just moments ago is completely gone. It has been entirely replaced by a rigid, impenetrable wall of furious denial. He has made his choice. He is choosing the comfortable lie over the devastating truth. He is choosing the son who is actively destroying him over the daughter who is trying to save him. "You are a complete disgrace to the Washington family name." My father spits, his voice trembling with a raw, undisguised hatred that physically strikes my chest. "I have sat here and listened to your vicious, unfounded accusations. I have watched you disrespect your brother, insult his wife, and attempt to sabotage the most important financial transaction in the history of our company. You have never supported this family. You have never contributed anything of value to our legacy. You have only ever brought bitterness, jealousy, and division into this house. Dad, I am showing you the legal proof," I say, keeping my voice perfectly steady, refusing to let the profound ache of his rejection break my composure. "They are mortgaging this house. If you let this deal proceed without an audit, you will lose everything." "Do not speak to me," he roars, slamming his fist down onto the desk so hard the crystal glasses on the side table rattle. "I know exactly what you are doing. You cannot handle the fact that Trey is a massive success. You cannot handle the fact that he single-handedly saved the resort and secured a multi-million-dollar corporate buyout. You are so consumed by your own petty jealousy that you would rather see this entire family fail than admit that your brother is a better business mind than you will ever be. My mother nods in fervent, unwavering agreement, stepping up to stand shoulder to shoulder with my father. Her face is a mask of cold maternal disappointment. We gave you everything, Kendra? She adds, her tone dripping with self-righteous indignation. We provided you with a beautiful home, an elite education, and a prestigious name. And this is how you repay us, by walking into our home on a day of celebration and launching a psychotic, jealous attack against your own blood. You should be deeply ashamed of yourself. I look at the four of them. I look at Trey, who is hiding a smug, victorious smirk behind his hand. I look at Chloe, who is breathing a heavy sigh of relief, realizing her manipulation has successfully blinded my parents to her crimes. I look at my mother, who is fiercely protecting a son, who views her as nothing more than collateral damage. And finally, I look at my father, the patriarch, who would rather march blindly into total financial ruin than admit his golden boy is a fraud. The last lingering thread of familial loyalty snaps completely. The microscopic sliver of hope that they would finally see me, finally value me, evaporates into the stale air of the study. They do not want to be saved, they want to be right, and they have just handed me the absolute moral freedom to completely destroy them. I want you to pack up your things and leave this property immediately, my father commands, pointing a stiff, trembling finger toward the heavy oak door. You are to walk out of this study, get into your car, and drive away. You are no longer welcome at this barbecue. You are no longer welcome in this house. And until you are ready to formally apologize to your brother and sign that waiver, you are no longer a part of this family. I will not have my legacy poisoned by your toxic, jealous behavior. Get out. The banishment hangs in the air, heavy and absolute. It is the moment they have been building toward my entire life. The final, formal severing of ties. They expect me to cry. They expect me to beg for their forgiveness, to frantically grab the gold pen and sign my rights away just to remain in their good graces. I do not shed a single tear. I do not offer a single useless word of defense. I simply look at my father and give him a slow, measured nod. I accept the banishment. I turn my back on them. I do not look at Trey. I do not look at Chloe. I reach out, grasp the cool brass handle of the heavy oak door, and pull it open. The loud, pulsing rhythm of the backyard party instantly floods the quiet hallway, a stark contrast to the devastating silence I leave behind in the study. I step out into the corridor and pull the door firmly shut, sealing them inside their own impending destruction. I walk down the long, carpeted hallway with my head held high. My posture is impeccable. My steps are purposeful and unhurried. I do not stop in the kitchen to grab my belongings. I do not look out the glass patio doors at the caterers or the laughing guests who are currently toasting to my brother's fabricated success. I walk straight to the heavy, ornate mahogany front door, turn the deadbolt, and step out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the late afternoon. The air outside is warm and thick with humidity. The sprawling, perfectly manicured front lawn of my parents' estate stretches out before me, a pristine symbol of the wealth they are about to lose entirely. I walk down the wide, sweeping brick steps, my heels clicking sharply against the masonry. The gravel driveway is long, curving gracefully toward the massive wrought iron security gates that mark the entrance to the property. I walk down the center of the driveway, the crunch of the gravel under my shoes serving as the only sound in the quiet front yard. I am calculating my next move. I have the routing numbers. I have the specific dates of the offshore transfers. I have the exact corporate structure of Sterling Development's purchase agreement locked permanently in my photographic memory. I know exactly which regulatory agencies to contact, and I know exactly which corporate compliance officers at Sterling will be most interested in receiving an anonymous, highly detailed tip regarding a fraudulent commercial deed transfer. The Washington family empire is a fragile glass house, and I am currently holding a massive sledgehammer. As I approach the halfway point of the long driveway, the heavy wrought iron security gates slowly begin to swing open. I pause, narrowing my eyes against the harsh afternoon sun. My parents are not expecting any more guests. The party has been underway for hours. A vehicle glides smoothly onto the property. It is not a caterer's van, and it is not a neighbor's luxury SUV. It is a sleek, black, heavily armored executive town car. The vehicle moves with a quiet, predatory grace, the dark-tinted windows concealing the occupants inside. It rolls slowly up the sweeping gravel driveway, the tires crunching softly, and comes to a smooth, deliberate stop, directly parallel to where I am standing, on the edge of the manicured lawn. The heavy engine idles with a low, incredibly powerful hum, vibrating the gravel beneath my feet. For a long, tense moment, nothing happens. I stand my ground, my hands resting loosely at my sides, refusing to step back or show any sign of intimidation. I know this specific type of vehicle. I know the kind of corporate power that travels behind bulletproof glass and tinted windows. The heavy rear passenger door smoothly opens with a quiet, solid click. A man steps out into the bright sunlight, completely ignoring the oppressive humidity. He is wearing a flawless, custom-tailored charcoal suit that screams old money and ruthless corporate efficiency. His silver hair is perfectly styled, and his posture radiates absolute unapologetic authority. He adjusts his expensive silk tie buttons his suit jacket with one fluid motion and turns his sharp, calculating eyes directly onto me. My breath catches slightly in my throat, though I do not let my expression change. I know exactly who this man is. Every single high-level wealth manager in the city of Atlanta knows who this man is. He is Richard Sterling. He is the utterly ruthless, brilliant, and notoriously unforgiving Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Developments. He is the exact corporate titan my brother is desperately trying to defraud. And more importantly, in the cutthroat high-stakes world of Atlanta commercial real estate and wealth management, he is my single biggest professional rival. Sterling does not look at the sprawling mansion behind me. He does not acknowledge the loud music thumping from the backyard. He keeps his piercing slate-gray eyes locked entirely on my face. A slow, knowing, and incredibly dangerous smile spreads across his lips. He reaches into the breast pocket of his charcoal suit and pulls out a crisp white envelope, tapping it thoughtfully against his knuckles. "Hello, Kendra," he says, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone that carries effortlessly across the gravel driveway. "We have a great deal of highly sensitive business to discuss. And I believe we share a mutual interest in the absolute destruction of your brother's current real estate portfolio." The crisp white envelope in Richard Sterling's hand catches the bright afternoon sunlight. I stop dead in my tracks, my expensive heels digging into the gravel driveway. The sheer gravity of his presence completely shifts the atmospheric pressure around us. Richard Sterling is not just an interested corporate buyer looking to expand his regional holdings. He is an apex predator in the Atlanta real estate market, a ruthless corporate shark renowned for executing hostile takeovers with surgical precision. He does not negotiate. He conquers. And right now, the man who has spent the last decade ruthlessly crushing independent wealth management firms is looking at me with a distinctly conspiratorial glint in his slate-gray eyes. He taps the envelope against his palm, his custom-tailored charcoal suit moving flawlessly with his broad shoulders. He knows exactly who I am. We have sat across from each other in tense boardroom negotiations before representing opposing clients in high-stakes corporate wars. He knows my reputation for absolute meticulousness, and I know his reputation for total devastation. "Your brother is an incredibly foolish man," Kendra Sterling says, his voice a rich, dark timbre that cuts easily through the humid Georgia air. He genuinely believes he is reeling in a massive corporate fish today. He actually thinks my acquisitions team failed to notice the glaring, gaping holes in the Blue Ridge Resort operating accounts. It is almost insulting how little effort he put into hiding the embezzlement. A cold, sharp thrill courses through my veins. I do not show a single ounce of surprise. In the world of high finance, information is the only currency that actually matters, and reacting is a sign of weakness. I maintain my rigid posture, locking my gaze onto his. "I assume you did not drive all the way out to the suburbs Just to complain to me about Trey's lack of accounting skills, I reply, my voice perfectly level and devoid of any intimidation. Sterling smiles, a genuine, terrifying curving of his lips that shows bright white teeth. I came to look the fool in the eye right before I pull the rug out from under his entire pathetic empire, he says, stepping smoothly around the open door of his armored town car. And I have a feeling you might want a front row seat to the execution. I hear you were just unceremoniously banished from the premises. He does not wait for my response. Sterling turns his back on me and begins walking with supreme, unhurried confidence not toward the heavy mahogany front door, but directly toward the wrought iron side gate that leads to the sprawling backyard. He is walking right into the heart of Trey's victory party. I stand alone on the gravel for exactly 2 seconds. My father specifically ordered me to leave. He banished me from the family, demanded I pack my things, and told me to drive away in disgrace. I look at my car parked just a few yards away. Then I look at the imposing figure of Richard Sterling disappearing around the side of the brick mansion. I do not get into my car. I turn around my heels, pivoting sharply on the gravel, and I walk right back toward the house. The transition from the quiet, tense driveway to the lavish backyard is jarring. The heavy thumping bass of the catered music washes over me as I step through the arched iron gateway. The expansive lawn is meticulously manicured, dotted with pristine white linen tables, towering floral arrangements, and an expensive open bar where a team of uniformed bartenders is rapidly pouring top-shelf liquor. Dozens of my parents' wealthy friends, local politicians, and country club socialites are mingling on the expensive stone patio, completely oblivious to the massive federal crimes funding their free drinks. I stay near the edge of the manicured hedges, allowing the shadows of the tall oak trees to conceal my return. I watch the crowd naturally part like the Red Sea as Richard Sterling strides confidently onto the patio. The shift in the party's dynamic is instantaneous. The loud, boisterous laughter dies down. The casual conversations evaporate. Every single person in the backyard recognizes the corporate titan who just graced their suburban barbecue. Trey and Chloe are standing near the center of the patio, surrounded by a group of fawning local investors. When Trey spots Sterling, his entire demeanor undergoes a violent, sickening transformation. The aggressive, furious tyrant who just screamed at me in the study vanishes instantly. In his place stands a desperate, sweating sycophant. Trey practically shoves a local city councilman out of the way to reach his corporate savior. Chloe is right on his heels, a plastic, strained smile plastered across her terrified face. My parents are not far behind. Andre and Vivian Washington, who just proudly banished their own daughter to protect a fraud, are now practically bowing to the billionaire CEO. My father extends his hand with an eager, desperate enthusiasm that makes my stomach churn with secondhand embarrassment. My mother smooths her designer dress, offering Sterling a bright, artificial smile that drips with aggressive Southern hospitality. Richard. What an absolute honor, my father booms, his voice carrying clearly over the soft jazz music now playing from the hidden speakers. We did not expect you to arrive in person. This is a tremendous surprise. Welcome to our home. Sterling accepts the handshake with a firm, dismissive grip, his eyes already scanning past my father to lock onto Trey. I never miss a closing celebration. Andre Sterling says, his tone smooth and perfectly polite, yet carrying an underlying edge of cold steel that only I seem to recognize, especially one involving an acquisition of this magnitude. Your son has certainly put together a remarkable presentation. Trey puffs out his chest, his ego instantly inflating at the perceived compliment. He completely misses the lethal sarcasm layered beneath Sterling's cultured voice. It has been a massive undertaking, Mr. Sterling Trey boasts, puffing out his chest and slipping an arm around Chloe's waist. We have poured our blood, sweat, and tears into the Blue Ridge property. We wanted to ensure it was in perfect, pristine condition for your corporate portfolio. Chloe nods vigorously, her knuckles turning white as she grips her crystal champagne flute. Absolute perfection, she echoes, her voice trembling slightly. A uniformed waiter steps forward, offering Sterling a fresh glass of imported champagne from a silver tray. Sterling takes the glass smoothly by the stem. He does not take a sip. Instead, he turns to face the crowd, commanding the entire backyard with an effortless magnetic authority. The music drops to a whisper. The guests turn their attention entirely to the billionaire holding court on the stone patio. "If I may have everyone's attention for a brief moment," Sterling announces, his voice projecting clearly across the manicured lawn. The idle chatter ceases immediately. All eyes are glued to him. Today marks a highly significant transition for Sterling Developments and for the Washington family. I want to propose a toast to Trey and Chloe Washington. He raises his glass high into the humid air. The sunlight catches the bubbling liquid. "To your brilliant stewardship of the mountain resort." Sterling projects loudly, his slate-gray eyes tracking Trey's reaction with predatory amusement. "To the incredible, highly creative financial strategies you employed to keep the property afloat. And to the absolute transparency and honesty you have demonstrated throughout this entire complex acquisition process. You have certainly given my corporate auditors something they will never ever forget." The crowd, completely ignorant of the vicious double meaning behind his words, breaks into a round of enthusiastic applause. My parents raise their glasses, their faces shining with unadulterated pride. They are practically glowing, completely convinced that their golden son has just been officially validated by one of the wealthiest men in the state. Trey raises his own glass, a massive, arrogant grin stretching across his face. He believes he has won. He believes he has successfully navigated the fraud, secured the multi-million-dollar payout, and eliminated the only person who could stop him. As Trey lowers his glass, his eyes sweep proudly across the crowd, soaking in the admiration. His gaze drifts past the open bar, past the floral arrangements, and finally lands directly on the edge of the manicured hedges. He sees me. The smug, victorious smile falls right off his face, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. The blood drains completely from his cheeks, leaving him looking pale and sickly in the bright sunlight. His eyes widen in absolute horror as he realizes I did not leave the property. I did not drive away in disgrace. I am standing right here watching his fragile kingdom teeter on the absolute brink of destruction. Trey's jaw tightens. He cannot scream at me. He cannot cause a scene in front of Richard Sterling and dozens of wealthy investors. He is completely trapped by his own desperate need to maintain appearances. He glares at me with a profound, violent fury, his eyes practically burning holes into my skin. He subtly tilts his head toward the driveway, his lips moving in a silent, frantic command. "Get out!" He mouths the words forcefully, his face contorting with hidden rage. He desperately gestures with his eyes, silently screaming at me to turn around and leave before I ruin his billionaire connection. Chloe follows his panicked gaze and spots me standing by the hedges. She visibly sways on her high heels, bringing a trembling hand up to clutch her pearl necklace, looking as though she is about to physically vomit onto the expensive stone patio. My father, noticing Trey's sudden distraction, turns his head and follows their line of sight. When he sees me standing there, directly defying his strict, explicit orders to vacate the premises, his face darkens with a terrible, promised wrath. He takes a threatening step toward me, clearly intending to forcefully drag me off the property himself. I do not give him the chance. I do not yell. I do not cause a dramatic, emotional scene. I do not act like the bitter, jealous spinster they so desperately want me to be. I maintain a posture of absolute, unshakable confidence. I step out from the shadow of the oak trees and walk directly onto the stone patio. My expensive heels click rhythmically against the stone, the sound sharp and precise. The crowd, sensing the sudden shift in gravity, naturally parts for me. I walk with the calm, lethal grace of a professional executioner. I do not look at my father, who is practically vibrating with suppressed rage. I do not look at my mother, who is staring at me in sheer disbelief. I do not look at Chloe, who looks like she is ready to pass out. I do not even look at Trey, who is silently hyperventilating beside the open bar. I walk straight past all of them, cutting directly through the heart of the celebration, and step right up to Richard Sterling. He turns to face me, lowering his champagne glass, that dangerous, calculating smile returning to his lips. He knows exactly what I am doing, and he is eagerly stepping back to let me operate. I extend my hand toward the billionaire CEO, ensuring that my voice carries clearly enough for my terrified brother and my furious parents to hear every single word. Mr. Sterling, I say, keeping my tone flawlessly polite, professional, and entirely devoid of fear. We have faced each other across the negotiating table many times, but I do not believe we have ever been properly introduced in a social setting. I am Kendra Washington, Trey's sister, and the actual legal owner of the Blue Ridge property you are attempting to buy. The heavy matte black business card is pinched perfectly between my index and middle fingers. It catches the afternoon light, the minimalist silver embossing gleaming against the dark textured stock. Richard Sterling stops mid-sentence, his slate-gray eyes locking onto the small rectangle of paper. He expects a plea for employment. He expects a desperate networking attempt from a minor corporate functionary trying to piggyback on her brother's success. Instead, he reads the words printed clearly across the center: Kendra Washington, founder and chief executive officer, Onyx Holdings. I watch the exact microscopic moment the information hits his brain. Onyx Holdings, the phantom parent company, the impenetrable corporate fortress buried deep within the absolute final addendums of his own purchase agreement. The supreme legal entity that holds the primary commercial deed to the Blue Ridge Mountain Resort and possesses the unilateral power to approve or instantly kill the $4.5 million acquisition. Sterling's arrogant chuckle dies instantly in his throat. The smug, condescending warmth vanishes from his eyes, replaced by a sudden razor-sharp spike of calculating tension. The hand holding his champagne flute freezes. He looks from the card up to my face, his mind violently recalibrating the entire power dynamic of the patio. For a man who built a multi-billion-dollar empire by knowing every single detail about his targets, realizing he has just been completely blindsided in the middle of a suburban barbecue is a profound professional shock. I do not give him time to recover. I do not allow him to step back and regain his corporate footing. I lean in, bridging the physical distance between us, stepping smoothly inside his guard. The loud, pulsing rhythm of the backyard music and the eager, sycophantic chatter of my parents' guests fade into a dull, meaningless hum. Before you wire $4.5 million on Monday morning, I whisper, my voice dropping to a low, lethal register meant exclusively for his ears. You might want to have your legal team run a hard manual title trace on who actually owns the dirt you are currently standing on, because the man you are toasting over there does not have the legal authority to sell you a single blade of grass. Sterling's jaw clenches so tightly, a muscle twitches visibly beneath his skin. The scent of his expensive cologne is sharp and metallic in the humid air. He is a predator who relies entirely on absolute information supremacy, and I have just told him he is about to wire millions of dollars into a massive, fraudulent black hole. He looks past my shoulder, his intense gaze landing heavily on Trey. My brother is standing frozen by the outdoor bar, his face the color of wet ash, sweating profusely through his linen shirt. He looks exactly like a man who knows the trap door is about to open beneath his feet. But Sterling is a shark. He has spent 2 decades crushing independent developers and executing ruthless hostile takeovers across the Southeast. His entire existence is built on an unbreakable foundation of immense, blinding ego. He simply cannot process the reality that he is being outmaneuvered by a black woman in her early 30s operating a private holding company from the shadows. His brain frantically searches for an alternative narrative, a comfortable lie that protects his pride and validates the millions his legal team has already spent drafting the acquisition. He forcefully relaxes his shoulders, pushing the dangerous, patronizing smile back onto his face. He casually slides my matte black business card into the breast pocket of his charcoal suit, patting it flat with a dismissive gesture. That is a highly impressive title, Kendra, Sterling says, his rich baritone returning to its normal booming volume, deliberately projecting across the patio, so my hovering parents and the silent guests can hear every word. And I certainly appreciate the creative, dramatic flair of your warning. But my legal department is the best in Atlanta. They have vetted every single inch of this transaction. He takes a slow, triumphant sip of his champagne, choosing to completely dismiss my warning as the desperate, erratic flailing of a jealous sibling. I understand that family dynamics can be incredibly difficult to navigate. Sterling continues, his tone dripping with a heavy, weaponized pity. Especially when one sibling achieves a massive, unprecedented level of success. It is perfectly natural to feel a little left behind. But let me assure you, the Sterling Development's acquisition is completely ironclad. Your brother has been nothing short of a visionary partner. I suggest you grab a drink, enjoy the barbecue, and celebrate the fact that your family name is about to become legendary. A loud collective sigh of absolute relief washes across the patio. The suffocating tension breaks instantly. My father's rigid shoulders drop, and a look of supreme triumphant vindication spreads across his face. My mother actually claps her hands together, practically glowing with pride. Chloe closes her eyes and leans heavily against a cocktail table, breathing a silent, desperate prayer of gratitude that the billionaire chose to ignore the truth. Trey lets out a booming artificial laugh, quickly stepping forward to reclaim his territory beside the CEO. Thank you, Richard. Trey says, his voice shaking slightly with residual adrenaline. My sister has always had a highly active imagination. We are working on getting her the help she so desperately needs. Now please let me introduce you to the local zoning commissioner. He has been dying to shake your hand. The crowd parts eagerly as Trey smoothly guides Sterling away from me, steering the billionaire back toward the center of the adoring audience. Sterling does not look back. He has made his choice. He has willingly blinded himself to the glaring red flags because his ego refuses to acknowledge my power. He is marching directly into the slaughterhouse, completely convinced he is the butcher. I stand alone on the edge of the stone patio, surrounded by the hostile, judging glares of my parents' wealthy friends. I am totally isolated, utterly rejected, and officially banished from the Washington family. My parents have chosen their golden son over the truth. They have chosen a fraudulent empire over their own daughter. They have locked themselves inside a burning building, absolutely convinced the flames are just a beautiful sunset. I slowly turn my head, my eyes locking onto Trey one final time. He is loudly boasting to the zoning commissioner, his chest puffed out, holding his champagne flute like a conquering king. But his eyes dart nervously toward me, betraying the deep primal terror clawing at his insides. He knows the corporate audit is inevitable. He knows his offshore accounts are exposed. He knows the bridge loan against our parents' house is a federal crime. I do not glare at him. I do not show an ounce of anger or resentment. I simply look at my brother with a profound, absolute expression of pity. It is the look you give a man who has already dug his own grave and is eagerly demanding you hand him a shovel. I turn on my heel, my crimson silk blazer catching the afternoon sun, and I walk away. I do not rush. I walk back across the sprawling, perfectly manicured lawn, the thumping bass of the party music slowly fading behind me. I walk through the heavy wrought iron gates and down the long gravel driveway, leaving the toxic, delusional world of my family completely behind me. My car, a sleek, understated black sedan, sits waiting at the curb. I unlock the doors with a soft chirp sliding into the cool, quiet leather interior. The heavy door shuts instantly, cutting off the outside world, wrapping me in a cocoon of absolute silence. I do not start the engine immediately. I sit behind the steering wheel, taking one long, deep breath, letting the finality of the banishment settle into my bones. I reach into my pocket and pull out my phone. The screen glows brightly in the shaded interior of the car. I bypass my standard contacts and open a highly secure, encrypted messaging application. I select a single name from the shortlist: Elias. He is the brilliant, utterly ruthless chief legal counsel for Onyx Holdings, a man who lives for corporate warfare and legal devastation. I press the call button. The line does not even ring once before it is picked up. Yes, Ms. Washington. Elias answers, his voice sharp, alert, and ready for action. I look through the windshield, my eyes fixed on the distant roofline of my parents' sprawling estate, the house they are about to lose completely because they blindly trusted a liar. They wanted a legacy built on fraud. They chose a corrupt billionaire over my warning. They wanted a war. It's time! I say, my voice cold, precise, and completely devoid of mercy. Execute the contingency protocols. Kill the Sterling acquisition deal immediately, trigger the forensic audit on the Blue Ridge operating accounts, and notify the federal authorities regarding the offshore wire transfers. I pause, letting the immense destructive weight of my next command settle into the silence of the car. And Elias, I add, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. Freeze it all. Every single account, every single asset. Burn it to the ground. Consider it done, Elias replies, hanging up the phone. The trap is officially sprung. The Washington Empire is over. The heavy adrenaline-fueled haze from the confrontation at the estate dissipates the moment my car merges onto the interstate. The transition from the lush suburban enclaves of Buckhead to the towering canyons of downtown Atlanta takes exactly 40 minutes. I use every second of that drive to forcefully sever the lingering emotional tethers to my family. I do not turn on the radio. I navigate the darkening highway in absolute terrifying silence, the rhythmic hum of the tires against the asphalt providing the only soundtrack to my calculated withdrawal. The sun is sinking rapidly below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pavement, and I watch the rearview mirror as the world I was raised in fades into the distance. The city skyline emerges ahead, a glittering, impenetrable fortress of commerce and power, and I feel my pulse steady into a measured rhythmic beat. I am no longer the banished daughter. I am the architect of their total ruin, and the time for hesitation has officially expired. I pull my vehicle into the subterranean parking garage of the heavily secured high-rise building that houses Elias's boutique law firm. The concrete walls are bathed in harsh fluorescent light, echoing with the sharp click of my heels as I stride toward the elevators. I swipe my secure access card, and the steel doors slide open silently, whisking me upward to the penthouse level. This space is not designed to comfort clients or project warm hospitality. It is a sterile, razor-sharp environment, built exclusively for high-stakes corporate warfare. There is no plush waiting room, no smiling receptionist offering sparkling water, just polished concrete floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the urban grid, and massive frosted glass conference rooms. Elias is waiting for me in the primary war room. He is standing by the expansive window, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, a steaming cup of black coffee held loosely in his left hand. Elias is a predator draped in bespoke tailoring, a brilliant and utterly ruthless chief legal counsel who thrives on dismantling fraudulent empires piece by piece. He turns as I enter, the glow of the city lights reflecting off his sharp features. A slow, dangerous smile spreads across his face as he reads my expression. We waste no time with pleasantries or sympathetic inquiries about my emotional state. He knows exactly what happened at the barbecue, and he knows exactly why I am standing in his office on a Saturday evening. We move directly to the massive central conference table, where the glow of multiple oversized computer monitors bathes the room in a harsh, clinical blue light. Elias takes his seat at the master terminal and brings up the encrypted interface for Onyx Holdings. Onyx is the phantom parent company I created 3 years ago, the impenetrable corporate shell that legally holds the actual verified commercial deed to the Blue Ridge Mountain Resort. Trey has spent the last 36 months running the resort's operating company, strutting around like a titan of industry, completely oblivious to the fact that his company is merely a tenant leasing the land from my holding firm. Because I am the sole legal and undisputed owner of Onyx Holdings, I possess absolute unilateral authority over the property and all of its associated financial arteries. I stand behind Elias, looking at the glowing dashboards that control the lifeblood of my brother's fabricated kingdom. I give Elias a single decisive nod. He hits a rapid sequence of keystrokes, and we immediately initiate a hard, uncompromising freeze on all of the resort's operating accounts. I watch the screens validate the commands, sending encrypted override signals directly to the commercial banking portals. Millions of dollars in operating capital payroll funds and vendor reserves are instantly locked behind a wall of cryptographic security. The transition is instantaneous and brutal. Trey can no longer move a single cent. He cannot pay his hospitality staff, he cannot issue refunds to angry guests, and most importantly, he cannot accept or finalize any incoming wire transfers from Sterling Developments. The financial lungs of the resort simply stop breathing. The next phase of the protocol requires surgical precision. We systematically and ruthlessly dismantle my brother's entire professional existence. Elias accesses the resort's digital infrastructure through the administrative backdoor I mandated during the initial lease agreement. With a few rapid consecutive commands, we officially revoke Trey's property management privileges. We sever his access to the internal corporate servers. We permanently disable his administrative email accounts, erasing his ability to communicate as the head of the company. We invalidate his digital security credentials, meaning his keycard will no longer even open the front doors of the resort's administrative building. He is completely, utterly locked out of the empire he spent years pretending to build. He is a king who has just been exiled from his own castle, stripped of his crown and his treasury in a matter of seconds. I watch the authorization bars on the monitor turn from a healthy green to a stark, unforgiving red. The sheer magnitude of the digital lockout is breathtaking. When Trey wakes up tomorrow morning, he will possess absolutely no authority, no money, and no access to the very business he swore he single-handedly saved. Every computer he touches will display a fatal access denied error, and every door he tries to open will flash red. The final strike of the evening is reserved for the true architect of the financial rot, Chloe. Elias pulls up the heavily encrypted files containing the offshore wire transfers I had meticulously tracked over the past 6 months. The financial evidence is glaring and entirely undeniable. We have the exact international routing numbers, the specific shell company destinations located in the Cayman Islands, and the clear, indisputable digital fingerprints linking every single fraudulent transaction directly to her private administrative terminal at the resort. Elias has already drafted the emergency injunction, and reading through it, I can see it as a masterpiece of legal devastation. The document formally flags Chloe for suspected corporate embezzlement and petitions the court for an immediate federal freeze on all of her personal and shared assets. It outlines the exact methodology she used to systematically siphon capital from the resort's operating budget, creating fake vendor invoices to mask the bleeding. Furthermore, it exposes the massive high-interest bridge loan she attempted to secure against my parents' primary residence as a desperate criminal cover-up. Elias hits the submission button, transmitting the injunction directly to the federal magistrate's emergency weekend docket. The digital confirmation flashes on the screen, a bright green checkmark that effectively seals her fate and guarantees a very loud, very public federal investigation. The legal trap is fully set. The steel jaws have snapped shut, and the keys have been permanently thrown away. There is absolutely no turning back from this precipice. The legal documents are officially filed with the courts, the commercial bank accounts are frozen solid, and the proper financial regulatory authorities have been notified of the impending fallout. The explosive charges have been planted at the foundation of the Washington family empire, and the fuse is currently burning down to the wire. I leave Elias in the war room to monitor the incoming digital alerts and manage any blowback from the banking institutions. I take the elevator back down to the silent parking garage, get into my car, and drive through the empty, quiet downtown streets toward my own high-rise luxury condo in the heart of the city. The transition from the sterile intensity of the law office to the quiet sanctuary of my home is stark. My penthouse is cool, minimalist, and impeccably clean, a living space entirely under my total control. I drop my keys onto the polished entry table and walk straight across the dark hardwood floors to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that dominate the living room. The glass offers an absolutely unobstructed panoramic view of the sprawling illuminated expanse of the Atlanta skyline. The city stretches out before me, completely ignorant of the financial earthquake I have just triggered. I move slowly to the marble kitchen island, open a dark mahogany cabinet, and select a heavy crystal glass. I uncork a rare, robust red wine and pour a generous measure. The dark liquid swirls against the faceted crystal like heavy velvet, catching the ambient light of the city. I walk back to the window, the cool glass pressing lightly against my fingertips. The silence of the condo is absolute, broken only by my own steady breathing. I stand in the stillness of my sanctuary, taking a slow, deliberate sip of the wine, letting the rich, complex flavors ground me in the present moment. I watch the distant headlights trace rivers of gold through the veins of the city below. I am waiting for the sun to rise, waiting for the corporate alarms to sound, and waiting for the dominoes to finally spectacularly fall. Monday morning arrives with the brilliant, uncompromising clarity of a perfectly executed trap. The sun crests over the Atlanta skyline, flooding my high-rise condo with a sharp golden light that reflects off the polished hardwood floors. I have been awake since dawn, sitting at my marble kitchen island with a cup of black coffee, watching the digital dashboard of Onyx Holdings on my laptop. The operating accounts are locked behind a solid wall of cryptographic security. The administrative access logs show a flat, uninterrupted line of denial codes. The financial arteries of the Blue Ridge Resort are completely severed. The Washington Empire is officially bleeding out. At precisely 9 o'clock, the absolute chaos begins. My phone resting face up on the cool marble counter erupts into a violent, continuous vibration. The screen lights up with a rapid-fire barrage of text messages, all originating from Trey. I do not touch the device. I simply lean back in my chair and watch the frantic, desperate notifications stack up against the lock screen. The initial messages are furious, dripping with his trademark arrogance. He demands to know what kind of psychotic computer hack I have pulled. He orders me to immediately call the IT department and undo whatever childish prank I have initiated on the corporate servers. He is standing in the lobby of the administrative building, screaming at a bewildered security guard because his master keycard is dead. The glass doors refuse to open. The system does not recognize his credentials. He is officially a ghost in his own castle. 10 minutes later, the tone of the text messages shifts from arrogant fury to a rapid, escalating panic. Trey has just attempted to use his corporate platinum card to pay a routine vendor invoice. The card has been hard declined. The merchant services terminal flashed a fatal error code indicating the primary funding account has been frozen by an external financial institution. Trey's texts switched to all caps. He threatens me with federal cyber-terrorism charges. He claims he is calling the police. He promises to have me thrown into a federal penitentiary for corporate sabotage. The profound, delicious irony of my brother threatening me with jail time while his own wife's offshore embezzlement accounts are actively sitting on a federal magistrate's desk is exquisite. He still fundamentally believes he is in control. He still believes this is a temporary nuisance, a minor roadblock on his guaranteed path to a multi-million-dollar payout. By 10:30, the localized fallout begins to breach the perimeter of my parents' pristine suburban bubble. Elias forwards me a highly secured digital copy of a public legal filing that has just been processed through the county clerk's office. The extravagant backyard barbecue from Saturday afternoon, the lavish catered celebration where my father proudly banished me from the family, was financed entirely by a fraudulent check. Chloe, operating in a state of absolute terrified desperation after our confrontation in the study, attempted to pay the high-end catering company from a secondary corporate account. That specific account is currently locked completely solid under Elias's emergency federal injunction. The check bounced so hard it immediately triggered fraud alerts at the local banking branch. The caterer is a ruthless, highly connected businesswoman who frequently services the most elite country club events in the city. She did not wait for an apology. She did not politely call my parents to ask for a replacement card. Sensing an immediate threat to her payment, she bypassed standard collection protocols and instantly filed a public mechanics lien directly against my parents' primary residence. The news hits the local social grapevine with the speed and devastation of a wildfire. Within 30 minutes, the suburban facade my mother has spent 3 decades meticulously cultivating cracks wide open. The whispered rumors of financial ruin are already circulating through the tennis courts and the morning charity committee meetings. The invincible Washington name is currently being dragged through the dirt. At exactly 11 o'clock, my phone rings. The caller ID displays my mother's name. I let the phone vibrate against the marble counter for 3 long, agonizing rings before I slowly slide the green icon across the screen. I lift the device to my ear, maintaining a posture of total relaxed calm. The sound of my mother weeping hysterically instantly fills the quiet space of my kitchen. Her voice is shrill, ragged, and completely stripped of its usual refined, aristocratic polish. She is absolutely unhinged. She does not greet me. She launches directly into a frantic, breathless tirade of profound delusion. "You have ruined everything," my mother screams, her voice cracking violently over the receiver. "You are a wicked, spiteful woman. The caterer just called the house, threatening to seize our property. My friends are calling me. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? You have cursed this family with your dark, negative energy. You brought this toxic jealousy into my house, and you are trying to destroy your brother on the most important day of his life." I do not say a single word. I simply listen to the rapid, shallow gasps of her breathing, visualizing the absolute panic sweeping through their manicured estate. She completely ignores the reality of the situation. She willfully blinds herself to the glaring, obvious truth that Chloe is an active criminal and Trey is a total fraud. In her mind, the bounced checks, the frozen accounts, and the locked doors are all simply a manifestation of my bad karma. "It is just a banking glitch." My mother continues her tone, adopting a desperate, frantic cadence as she tries to convince herself of the lie. "Trey explained everything to us. You tampered with the routing numbers to create a temporary hold. But it does not matter, Kendra. It does not matter what kind of petty, jealous sabotage you try to pull. Richard Sterling is a brilliant, honorable man who recognizes your brother's absolute genius." She pauses to take a shuddering, tearful breath, gathering her remaining strength for one final venomous strike. Trey and Richard are meeting at the executive offices at noon for the official closing. She snaps, her voice dripping with a toxic, vindictive certainty. Trey is going to sit down at that boardroom table, explain the banking glitch, and finalize the acquisition. He is going to secure the $4.5 million. And the very second that wire transfer clears, you are completely dead to us. We will never speak your name again. You are entirely cut off from this family forever. I listen to her rant without interrupting. I let the full toxic weight of her rejection echo in the silence of my kitchen. When she finally runs out of breath, leaving nothing but the sound of her frantic, ragged weeping on the other end of the line, I respond. "I'll see you at the closing, Mom." I say, my voice perfectly calm, cold, and razor-sharp. I hang up the phone. The click of the disconnected line is absolute. I place the device back onto the marble island. There is no trace of sorrow in my chest. There is no lingering desire for their approval or their love. The emotional tethers that bound me to their approval have been completely, permanently incinerated. They want a war over their precious legacy, and I am about to deliver total devastation. I walk out of the kitchen and move directly into my expansive walk-in closet. Today is not a day for corporate camouflage. Today is a day for an execution, and an execution demands a very specific type of armor. I bypass the muted grays and the safe diplomatic navy suits. I pull a stark, brilliant white tailored blazer and matching trousers from the rack. It is the color of total, unblemished victory. The fabric is crisp and heavy, cutting a sharp, authoritative silhouette. I pair it with a simple, elegant gold watch and my favorite matte black stiletto heels. The heels are pointed and dangerous, designed to strike the floorboards like a gavel. I pull my hair back into a sleek, unforgiving style, ensuring there is not a single strand out of place. My makeup is minimal, sharp, and entirely focused on emphasizing the cold, unwavering certainty in my eyes. I look in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me is not a discarded daughter. She is the founder and CEO of Onyx Holdings, and she is about to completely dismantle a fraudulent empire. I grab my leather briefcase containing the certified physical copies of the property deeds, the offshore wire routing logs, and Elias's federal injunction. I walk out of my condo, lock the heavy door behind me, and take the private elevator down to the subterranean parking garage. The drive through the midday Atlanta traffic is smooth and uneventful. The city outside my tinted windows is bustling with standard corporate activity, completely unaware of the multi-million-dollar bloodbath about to take place in the financial district. I navigate the wide avenues with practiced ease, my hands relaxed on the leather steering wheel. I pull into the exclusive, highly secured parking structure of the towering glass skyscraper that houses Sterling Development's regional headquarters. This is the exact building where Trey believes he is about to be crowned a king. He believes he is walking into a friendly, celebratory handover. He believes the bounced checks and the dead keycards are minor inconveniences that Richard Sterling will overlook with a casual wave of his billionaire hand. I park my sedan in a VIP visitor spot, kill the engine, and step out into the climate-controlled garage. My heels click sharply against the polished concrete, echoing off the concrete pillars. I walk toward the private executive elevator, swiping the temporary digital access pass Elias arranged for me earlier this morning. The heavy steel doors glide open silently. I press the button for the 52nd floor. The elevator shoots upward, ascending smoothly through the steel spine of the skyscraper. The digital numbers climb rapidly above the doors. 50, 51, 52. With a soft melodic chime, the doors part. I step out into the sprawling, ultra-modern reception area of Sterling Developments. The space is intimidating by design, featuring soaring ceilings, dark marble floors, and panoramic views of the entire city. Elias is already waiting for me near the front desk. He is wearing a dark, immaculate suit, holding a slim leather portfolio. He looks entirely relaxed, but his dark eyes gleam with the barely contained anticipation of a lawyer who is about to deploy a tactical nuke inside a boardroom. He gives me a single approving nod as I approach. "Are the players assembled?" I ask, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet reception area. "Everyone is present and accounted for," Elias replies, falling into step smoothly beside me as we walk down the wide, glass-walled corridor. Richard Sterling is sitting at the head of the table with his chief acquisitions officer. "Your brother and your parents arrived 10 minutes ago." Trey is currently sweating through his tailored shirt, desperately trying to explain why his financial portals are temporarily unresponsive. "And Chloe?" I ask, keeping my eyes fixed straight ahead on the massive double doors at the end of the hall. Sitting right beside him, looking like she is preparing for a federal indictment, Elias says, a dark smirk playing on his lips. "The stage is perfectly set, Ms. Washington." We stop directly in front of the heavy frosted glass doors of the primary executive boardroom. I can hear the muffled, frantic cadence of Trey's voice leaking through the soundproof seal. He is talking fast, pitching hard, desperately trying to keep the illusion alive for just a few more minutes. I place my hand flat against the cool metal handle of the boardroom door. I do not knock. I do not wait for an invitation. I press down, push the heavy glass open, and step directly into the lion's den. The heavy frosted glass doors of the executive boardroom yield to my push, swinging inward with a satisfying, substantial weight. The sudden, forceful intrusion instantly shatters the hushed, tense murmurs filling the room. The space is a monument designed specifically for corporate intimidation, featuring expansive floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a dizzying, unobstructed panoramic view of the sprawling Atlanta skyline. A massive polished mahogany table dominates the exact center of the room. The air conditioning is set to a crisp, unforgiving temperature, circulating a faint, expensive scent of leather and citrus. On the left side of the table sit the architects of my lifelong misery. My parents, Andre and Vivian Washington, sit rigidly in their high-backed chairs. They are desperately trying to project the smug, victorious aura of a legacy family closing a historic real estate deal, but the cracks in their facade are glaringly obvious. My father is gripping his leather portfolio so tightly his knuckles are completely white. My mother is picking nervously at her diamond bracelet, her eyes darting anxiously around the room. Beside them, Trey is sweating profusely through his custom-tailored linen shirt. His leg bounces in a rapid, frantic rhythm against the underside of the table. Chloe sits frozen next to him, her face a rigid mask of poorly concealed terror, heavily contoured with expensive makeup that simply cannot hide the dark circles of a sleepless, panicked weekend. They are cornered animals trying desperately to pretend they are still the apex predators. On the right side sits Richard Sterling, flanked by a phalanx of high-priced corporate attorneys who all radiate severe clinical impatience. I step over the threshold, and the entire room falls dead silent. My tailored crimson designer suit is a vibrant, aggressive splash of color in a room drowning in muted grays and safe navy blues. The silk lining rustles softly as I walk, my posture impeccable, my chin held high. I am flanked by absolute, unyielding power. Elias strides flawlessly at my right side, exuding the predatory confidence of a lawyer who knows he holds an unbeatable hand. Behind us march two senior forensic accountants from one of the most ruthless auditing firms on the East Coast. They carry heavy, reinforced metal briefcases that contain the absolute financial destruction of the Washington family empire. Trey leaps to his feet the exact moment his brain registers my presence. His heavy leather chair scrapes violently against the polished hardwood floor, producing a sharp grating sound. The arrogant, confident sneer he had been forcing for Sterling completely vanishes instantly, replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. My father stands up immediately after him, his face flushing a deep, dangerous shade of purple. The veins in his neck bulge as his legendary temper flares to life. "What is the absolute meaning of this?" My father barks, his deep voice echoing sharply off the glass walls. "You were expressly forbidden from stepping foot near this family or this transaction. You were permanently banished from our property. Get out of this building immediately before I have you arrested for criminal trespassing and corporate espionage." I do not even look at him. I do not acknowledge the man who willfully chose a comfortable, disastrous lie over his own daughter. I keep my eyes locked entirely on Richard Sterling. Sterling sits at the opposite end of the mahogany table, slowly steepling his fingers beneath his chin. He recognizes me from the barbecue. He recognizes the crimson suit. He recognizes the specific warning he so arrogantly ignored just 48 hours ago. His slate-gray eyes narrow rapidly, calculating the sudden violent shift in the room's power dynamic. "Mr. Sterling, I sincerely apologize for this absurd theatrical interruption." Trey stammers, his voice pitching slightly higher than usual as a bead of sweat rolls down his temple. He desperately attempts to block my path, stepping quickly around the massive table. "My sister has been dealing with severe, documented mental health issues. She is completely delusional. We will have building security remove her right now so we can finalize the wire transfer and complete the acquisition." Chloe jumps in, her voice shrill and trembling as she clutches her designer handbag. She is just bitter because Trey built this incredible resort from the ground up and she has contributed absolutely nothing. "Please, Mr. Sterling, let us just sign the final addendums and ignore her." I glide smoothly past Trey, completely ignoring his frantic attempts to physically block me. Elias steps neatly between us, effectively neutralizing my brother with a cold, hard stare that promises immediate, devastating legal retaliation if Trey dares to lay a single finger on me. I walk directly to the head of the mahogany table, claiming the unoccupied space of ultimate authority. The two forensic accountants step forward in perfect synchronization. They place their heavy metal briefcases onto the polished wood. The synchronized heavy thud of the cases hitting the table sounds exactly like a judge bringing down a final, unforgiving gavel. I look directly at the billionaire CEO. "I told you to run a hard manual title trace, Richard. I explicitly warned you that the man drinking your expensive champagne did not have the legal authority to sell you a single blade of grass. You chose to ignore me. You chose to brush me off as a jealous sibling. You chose to believe a desperate, sweating fraud over the actual verified legal owner of the Blue Ridge property." Sterling's head attorney, a sharp-featured man with intense, assessing eyes, bristles indignantly at my statement. He leans forward, tapping his expensive pen against a legal pad. "Miss Washington, we have thoroughly vetted the operating company's documents. Your brother is listed as the primary executive and sole managing director. We are fully prepared to initiate the $4.5 million wire transfer the exact moment the final signatures are recorded. You have absolutely no legal standing to halt this acquisition." Elias smiles. It is a terrifying, clinical, and utterly ruinous smile. He reaches into his slim leather portfolio and extracts a thick stack of freshly printed, legally binding court-certified documents. He begins distributing them across the mahogany table with the smooth precision of a casino dealer, sliding a heavy copy directly in front of Sterling and his lead attorney. "What you vetted was a complete shell," Elias states, his voice projecting absolute, undeniable authority. "You vetted the Blue Ridge Operating Company, a localized, low-level management entity that simply leases the physical property. You completely failed to vet the supreme parent organization. Onyx Holdings is the exclusive, undisputed owner of the commercial deed. My client, Kendra Washington, is the sole founder, primary shareholder, and chief executive officer of Onyx Holdings. She owns the dirt. She owns the buildings. She owns the air above the resort." My mother gasps loudly, pressing a trembling hand over her mouth. She looks at my father, her eyes wide with mounting, suffocating terror. My father stares blindly at the documents Elias just distributed, his jaw working furiously as he desperately tries to comprehend the massive, impenetrable legal fortress I have secretly built entirely around his precious family legacy. Furthermore, I continue, my voice cutting through the thick, panicked silence of the boardroom like a finely sharpened blade. As of 8 o'clock Saturday evening, Onyx Holdings officially revoked Trey Washington's property management privileges. We executed a complete, unyielding cryptographic lock on every single corporate bank account associated with the resort. That is exactly why your corporate credit cards are declining all over the city, Trey. That is exactly why you cannot access the internal servers. That is exactly why the caterer from your lavish little victory party just filed a highly public mechanics lien against our parents' primary residence. The color drains entirely from my mother's face. The mention of the mechanics lien completely shatters her remaining composure. The public humiliation she cares about more than anything else in the world has finally breached the boardroom walls. She slumps back in her chair, shaking her head in frantic, desperate denial. "No," she whimpers, her voice thin and reedy. "Trey promised us it was just a temporary banking glitch. He swore to us he would fix the server issues today. He said the bank made an error. I do not stop. I show absolutely zero mercy. I turn my lethal focus directly onto Chloe. She is practically vibrating with fear, her eyes darting frantically toward the heavy glass doors, as if calculating her chances of escaping the building before federal agents arrive. I give the forensic accountants a single sharp nod. They pop the brass latches on their metal briefcases. They extract thick, heavy binders filled with highlighted financial routing logs, offshore transfer receipts, and glaring, undeniable evidence of massive corporate embezzlement. They slide the binders across the polished wood toward Sterling's legal team. "We did not just freeze the operating accounts," I declare, my voice echoing off the glass walls with absolute crushing finality. "We initiated a full, comprehensive, and uncompromising forensic audit, and what we found buried in the ledgers was truly spectacular. For the past 18 months, Chloe Washington has been systematically siphoning capital from the resort's operational budget. She has been fabricating fraudulent vendor invoices to mask the severe bleeding, routing hundreds of thousands of dollars directly into hidden offshore shell companies located in the Cayman Islands." I look back at my father delivering the final devastating blow that will permanently end the Washington Empire. When the stolen funds triggered a catastrophic liquidity crisis, they desperately needed an immediate infusion of cash to keep the resort afloat until they could secure this corporate buyout. So Trey and Chloe orchestrated a highly illegal, predatory bridge loan. They used forged signatures to borrow heavily against the equity of your primary residence, Dad. They mortgaged your home to cover their federal crimes. And they were planning to use Mr. Sterling's purchase money to pay off the fraudulent loan before you ever found out you were bankrupt. My father physically recoils as if I have just struck him brutally across the face. He looks at Trey, his eyes begging for a denial. He desperately wants his golden son to laugh, to call me a liar, to explain how this is all just another malicious, jealous fabrication. But Trey is completely silent. He is staring blankly at the mahogany table, his chest heaving rapidly, his entire body trembling with the horrifying realization that he is facing decades in a federal penitentiary. Richard Sterling is no longer smiling. The arrogant, dismissive billionaire who toasted my brother's brilliant stewardship on Saturday afternoon is completely gone. He is staring at the financial documents Elias placed in front of him, his face carved from cold, furious stone. He realizes exactly how close he came to wiring millions of dollars into an active radioactive crime scene. He realizes how close his own pristine corporate empire came to being infected by Trey's toxic, idiotic fraud. The reality of the trap fully descends upon the room. The absolute checkmate is undeniable. Chloe immediately stands up, her face red, screaming, "Security! She doesn't belong here! Get her out!" But Sterling's head lawyer is staring at a newly delivered folder. He turns pale and whispers, "Mr. Sterling, the sellers do not own the property." Sterling's head snaps toward me. His heavy brow furrows in deep, unadulterated confusion before his slate-gray eyes lock onto mine. He is a man who deals in absolute certainties, and the foundation of his reality has just been violently ripped away. I do not wait for him to demand an explanation. I take the final few steps toward the absolute head of the massive mahogany table, the seat of ultimate authority, and I pull back the heavy leather chair. I sit down, smoothing the crimson silk of my blazer, projecting an aura of complete, unshakable control. Elias moves with the lethal, practiced grace of an executioner. He steps up beside me and begins to distribute the final pieces of our arsenal. He slides the original watermarked commercial deed to the resort across the polished wood directly into Sterling's line of sight. Next, he drops a thick bound folder containing the original financial bailout documents from 5 years ago. Finally, he presents the devastating forensic audit of Chloe's offshore accounts, the pages heavy with highlighted routing numbers and undeniable proof of theft. "Trey is not an owner," I announce, my voice echoing with ringing crystal clarity in the dead silent room. "He is my employee. He is a mid-level property manager I hired entirely out of pity to save my parents from living on the street. And his wife Chloe has been stealing my operating funds for 3 straight years." The gaslighting completely and irreversibly shatters. The perfectly constructed fictional universe my family has inhabited for half a decade disintegrates into a million jagged pieces right in front of their eyes. My parents stare at the undeniable documents spread across the table in absolute paralyzing horror. My father's trembling hands reach out to pull the 5-year-old bailout file closer. His eyes dart frantically across the pages, recognizing his own signature on the original foreclosure notices, followed immediately by the legal acquisition papers transferring the debt to Onyx Holdings. The realization hits him with the force of a freight train. Trey did not save the family. Trey did not find a miraculous, anonymous angel investor. I did. I was the phantom buyer who pulled them back from the brink of total ruin. "You," my mother gasps, the word tearing from her throat like a physical injury. She looks at me, her eyes wide, staring at the daughter she spent years relentlessly degrading, the daughter she told to find a different table at family functions, the daughter she proudly banished just 2 days ago. "Yes, Mom," I reply, holding her gaze without a single ounce of sympathy. "Me. I purchased the debt. I bought the land. I put Trey in charge of the daily operations so he could maintain his precious ego, and you could maintain your social standing at the country club. I gave him a massive salary and absolute operational freedom, provided he simply ran the business effectively. But instead of showing an ounce of gratitude, he used my property to play pretend, and his wife used it as her personal piggy bank." I gesture toward the forensic audit resting in front of Sterling. "Trey has been draining you dry, Dad." When Chloe's embezzlement created a massive, unsustainable liquidity crisis at the resort, Trey panicked. He knew he could not ask Onyx Holdings for capital without triggering a financial review, so he forged your signatures. He took out a $500,000 predatory bridge loan against your primary residence to cover his wife's theft. He was planning to use Mr. Sterling's acquisition money to quietly pay off the loan before the bank seized your home. The silence in the boardroom is absolute, heavy, and suffocating. Trey is entirely broken. He slumps forward, burying his face in his hands, completely unable to meet his father's eye. Chloe is perfectly rigid, her heavily manicured fingernails digging into the mahogany wood, her breath coming in shallow, terrified gasps. Richard Sterling is furious. The arrogant, condescending warmth he displayed at the barbecue is entirely gone, replaced by a cold, homicidal rage. He realizes with sickening clarity that he was mere moments away from being deeply implicated in a massive, multi-million-dollar federal wire fraud scheme. He stands up abruptly, buttoning his suit jacket with sharp, violent, aggressive movements. "You completely arrogant, pathetic little fraud!" Sterling snarls, staring directly down at Trey. His voice vibrates with a dangerous, lethal intensity. "You sat in my office. You drank my wine. You looked me in the eye and guaranteed a clean, unencumbered transfer of assets. You tried to drag Sterling Developments into a federal money laundering investigation." Sterling turns to his head attorney, who is already packing the legal pads into his briefcase with frantic speed. "Contact the regional FBI field office immediately. Inform them that we have just uncovered a highly sophisticated, fraudulent $500,000 bridge loan attempt. Give them every single piece of correspondence we have ever had with Trey Washington." "Mr. Sterling, please." Trey begs, his voice cracking pitifully. He reaches out a trembling hand. "We can fix this. I can make it right." Sterling does not even dignify the plea with a response. He looks at me, giving a sharp, curt nod of genuine, hard-earned respect. "Ms. Washington, your legal team is exceptionally thorough. I apologize for doubting your warning on Saturday. You have saved my firm from a catastrophic liability. If you ever decide to legitimately sell this property, you have my direct number." Sterling turns on his heel and marches out of the boardroom, his phalanx of high-priced corporate attorneys following closely behind him. The heavy glass doors swing shut, sealing the room. The boardroom is now entirely empty, leaving only my broken family, Elias, the two forensic accountants, and me. The silence stretches out, thick and heavy with the toxic residue of decades of lies. My mother breaks down. It is not the angry, vindictive crying from her phone call this morning. It is a desperate, guttural sobbing born of total, absolute realization that she has backed the wrong horse. She stands up, her knees trembling, and reaches her hands out toward me across the long expanse of the mahogany table. "Kendra, baby!" She weeps, her voice thick with panic and pleading. "We did not know. I swear to you, we had no idea what he was doing. We thought Trey was a genius. We thought he was taking care of us. Please, Kendra, you have to help us. You are our daughter. We are your family. You cannot just let the bank take our home." My father stands up slowly. The proud, booming patriarch who ruled our household with an iron fist is completely gone. He is stripped of his arrogance, his broad shoulders slumped, his face pale and drawn. He looks at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears, silently begging for the exact same salvation he arrogantly threw back in my face all my life. I look at the people who raised me. I look at the brother who stole from me and the sister-in-law who despised me. For my entire life, I craved their validation. I twisted myself into knots, trying to earn a fraction of the pride they so freely showered upon Trey. But looking at them now stripped of their delusions and facing the brutal consequences of their own actions, I feel absolutely nothing. No anger, no sorrow, just a profound, liberating emptiness. I do not waver. I remain seated, my posture perfectly straight, my hands folded neatly on the table. "I bought this property to save you," I state, my voice devoid of any emotional warmth. "I stepped in when the bank was moments away from throwing you onto the street. I gave you a lifeline and I asked for absolutely no credit. But the very first instinct you had when you thought Trey had struck it rich was to insult me. Your first instinct was to exclude me, banish me, and blindly follow the son who was actively robbing you blind. You chose your golden boy. Deal with his debts." My mother drops back into her chair, burying her face in her hands, her wails echoing off the glass walls. My father closes his eyes, accepting the finality of the judgment. I turn my attention to Trey and Chloe. Elias reaches into his portfolio one last time. He withdraws a crisp, white legal envelope and slides it directly across the table until it rests against Trey's clenched fists. That is a formal 30-day eviction notice for the luxury resort cottage you currently occupy. I inform them, my tone strictly professional. You will pack your personal belongings and vacate the premises. Furthermore, Onyx Holdings is officially granting you exactly 48 hours to return the stolen operating funds in full. If the embezzled money is not sitting in my primary accounts by Wednesday afternoon, Elias has strict, unyielding instructions to hand the entire forensic audit directly over to the district attorney. You will face immediate aggressive criminal charges for grand larceny and wire fraud. Trey does not speak. Chloe covers her mouth, stifling a terrified sob. They have absolutely no leverage, no money, and nowhere to run. They are completely, utterly defeated. I stand up from the head of the table. I button my crimson blazer. I do not offer a final, dramatic parting word. They do not deserve any more of my time or my energy. I give Elias a brief nod, and we turn toward the exit. The forensic accountants snap their briefcases shut, the sharp metallic clicks echoing like gunshots in the quiet room. I push through the frosted glass doors, leaving the suffocating toxicity of the Washington family behind me forever. I walk down the wide corridor, step into the executive elevator, and ride it down to the ground floor. I walk out of the skyscraper and step directly into the bright, blinding Atlanta sun. The afternoon heat is thick and comforting. The city bustles with energy and life. As I stand on the pavement, breathing in the fresh air, my phone begins to vibrate in my pocket. I pull it out and check the caller ID. It is my lead architect. I answer the call, a genuine, relaxed smile finally spreading across my face. "Yes, David," I say, stepping out into the flow of the city sidewalk. "The Sterling deal is officially dead. It is time to begin the luxury renovations on my resort. Let us review the blueprints for the new spa this afternoon." I hang up the phone and slide it back into my pocket. The heavy chains of familial obligation and the toxic need for validation have finally been broken. I am finally free.